And a pleasant good afternoon to everyone out there in Irish Breakdown land. What? You're just laughing at me, right?
Just kicked off right with like.
Oh, yeah, well, you know me. Welcome, everybody, into another edition of the Irish Breakdown podcast. I am Vince D'Addario. That is Brian Driscoll. And we are here today, as the title would suggest. We are going to talk about Notre Dame, who we believe will be Notre Dame's breakout players on offense. Now, I got to remind everybody, kind of the way we do this. So we're going to do this in kind of podcast form. We're going to just toss around the topic back and forth, he and I, and then once we are done with everything, then we will kick it over to the questions, or the comments / questions. But we'll kind of get through our part first, and then we'll get over to the comments. If you want to throw in a comment, you can throw us a super chat. We will throw you in right away. If you really want to comment on something that we're talking about, that is absolutely okay. We will accept that. But we're kind of going back to our not old format, but we were talking about recruiting and all kinds of other things. So we're gonna jump back into a little bit of team talk, Brian. Some post-spring team talk or
July came
fall.
Fast. I mean, it came fast, and I'm like, man, all the topics we got to discuss. We got to break down opponents. There's a very busy month of June in recruiting.
I would say
it really was.
The opponent thing is what snuck up on me because we have to preview 12 opponents, and we don't have 12 weeks before the season starts.
Some of those opponents we'll be able to knock out in a little bit quicker format.
I know. But June was all about recruiting. And
I mean, we
wrong with
could do an hour-and-a-half long show in Toledo, but we're not going to.
Nobody's going to watch that. I don't even know that I'd be all that
crowd, I think they would. I think our crowd likes learning, but it just would be like, why make them sit through that? We're just not going to do that.
Yeah, that wouldn't be nice of us.
We're not going to do that.
So today we are talking about breakout players offensively. Of course, we will have a defensive breakout player show as well. That will come tomorrow, actually, the way we planned it out for this week. So, Brian, explain to the good folks at Irish Breakdown land what a breakout player is. What's our definition for how we chose to go about this?
Well, we're trying to keep some of these things as broad as possible, and not get too narrow with them. So when we kind of sat and thought of what is the criteria for a breakout player, it's really kind of three levels. One is someone who didn't play, who becomes a key rotation guy. It doesn't necessarily have to be a starter, but a guy that's a really key rotation player. It could be someone who was a rotation player or a backup that becomes more of an impactful player, even if he's not the guy. And some of some of the guys we pick will make sense as to why we pick that. The other one is obviously some guys who are good players already that become stars.
Yeah,
and one of those might surprise you. One of my picks for a breakout player might surprise somebody. Fits into that third category, and so that's kind of because you need all three types of those players to be successful. You don't just need stars. You also need really good rotation role players. You need good depth. I mean, you need all those parts of it, and this show kind of covers all of those things. And so that's what we're going to kind of get into. But there's definitely there's a lot more candidates for me of the haven't played a whole lot yet than we expect to break out than there is on defense, because the offense did such a poor job really last season of playing its depth in any kind of meaningful manner. I mean, even if you look at a guy we're going to talk about first, some of the guys put up numbers, but the numbers came a lot of times in backup, fourth quarter,
mop up. It's mop
snaps and stuff like that.
Be honest, yeah.
So, it's going to be a fun show, and these guys are going to be really big keys to how good Notre Dame is going to be this year. That's the thing, is some of these guys breaking out, and there's others we could have gone with. These guys are going to play a big role in whether or not this Notre Dame offense can be the kind of unit that it needs to be if Notre Dame is going to. I mean, it's not even about getting back to the playoff anymore. It's like, okay, they've been there, done that 2 of the last 3 years. It's okay. Can you actually make some noise finally when you get there?
Right.
That's where Kelly's raised the bar, right? I mean, he's raised the bar to the point where it's like, okay, you've been in the playoff 2 of the last 3 years. That's fine. It's time to now do some damage when you get there.
They haven't done that yet. They haven't done that yet.
Right.
So
especially offensively.
Fair. That's fair. Okay, so let's jump right in, Brian. We both had so just to kind of peek behind the curtain here, we both came up with a list. We compared the list. We had some that were the same, and we had some that were different. And so this first guy was on both of our lists, and I think it'll be very clear to everyone why that was. As I'm scrolling through some of the comments here on the side already, Many people have this gentleman on their list as well because they actually watch football, and it's very obvious that this guy could be a breakout player.
Yeah. And that is who, Vince?
Chris Tyree. Yes.
I feel like if we didn't pick Chris Tyree, we'd have lost like 1,000 followers. Rightfully so. Like these guys are idiots. If you don't have Chris Tyree in your breakout player category, then you just don't know what you're doing. And I'm going to go follow someone else who's not completely devoid of any football knowledge. Look, and again, this is one of those things where this is going to be a big part of this offense this year. And when we talk about Chris Tyree as a breakout player, this in no way, shape, form, or fashion means that we think Kyren Williams is taking a step back. Right. It's more about this becoming a dynamic duo that is going to take the next step. It means we don't think Brian Kelly is going to look at Chris Tyree as a guy that's going to just simply give Kyren Williams a breather now and then, right? He's going to be a guy that is going to become a key part of this offense, meaning a more unique role for Kyren Williams, a more expanded role for Kyren Williams, meaning maybe some running back stuff and some receiver stuff now. Right. And then, of course, Chris Tyree getting some of that look as well. And we saw him in the spring already showing a more advanced repertoire. We saw him making more plays in the pass game. We saw him with some improved pass blocking in the spring game. Those are all parts of Chris Tyree's game that he's going to have to improve upon in order to earn extra playing time. And honestly, I mean, he should get more playing time anyway, but we know how Brian Kelly kind of you got to be able to do it all, right? You can't just be a one-trick pony. You have to be able to do it all if you're gonna play more. Brian Kelly doesn't do the whole we're gonna use your strengths thing, right? It just doesn't really do that. So this is an area where if Chris Tyree can do some of those other things, not only does it expand his role, but then it makes his strengths even better. Right. If you have to be worried about Chris Tyree running swing routes and some of those kind of things, and you may not be as focused in on, especially if you got Kyren Williams in the slot or something like that, you may not be as focused on him just hammering it right up that A gap on an inside zone and getting that crease. And those are the things that we talk about. But, being more efficient with his running is something I expect him to do, a little more efficient with his footwork. We saw that in the spring game. What we saw in the spring game that we didn't see a lot of in the fall was Chris Tyree being able to make something out of nothing. And part of it was because he had more touches. Right. I mean, it's kind of hard to do that when you're getting 2, 3, 4 carries a game, and I feel like he has to double that this year. He needs 8 to 12 touches a game, and touches, not carries, touches a game. And that's where you're going to see him, out of one of those, the hope is that he's going to break one of them for at least a 20 to 30 yard gain minimum. And so that's where, when I look at him, Vince, I see expanded role. I think additional touches are going to additional touches, meaning not waiting until the fourth quarter to get him to carry against, just like hypothetically the ACC championship game, and so then that 21-yard touchdown run he has his first carry of the game happens in the first or second quarter, not in the fourth quarter. So those are the things I expect to see from him. And I think if he breaks out, the reason it's so important and the reason he's number one on my list, Vince, because if he breaks out, it makes the offense better. It makes Kyren Williams better. It makes the perimeter pass game better, because now it's like, hey, if Chris Tyree's in there, you can't spread out too much to defend the wide stuff. You can't spread out too much to defend the perimeter game, the RPOs, things like that, because Chris Tyree needs like that amount of space. He needs you to be that far off from him for that to turn into a home run. And he has a chance to be Notre Dame's biggest home run threat of the last 20 years, really, at running back. Right now, that honor belongs to Josh Adams, CJ Prosise with a close second. If Chris Tyree becomes the player that I think he can be, even this year, I think he's going to be that guy. No question about it.
And I think it's all about the touches, right? I mean, it's all about Chris Tyree getting more touches, like you said, being able to be explosive early on in the game when the game is still in doubt, when the game matters. And like you said, I do believe that Chris Tyree getting those touches and being explosive not only takes the heat off of the people that you mentioned, but it also takes a little bit of heat off the offensive line. Right. And look, we're both have questions about the offensive line. We've expressed that. The questions seem to grow. They're not getting smaller as we go
shouldn't
through the
have
summer.
questions. I mean, Kane Madden was just named a first-team preseason All-American, and Jarrett Patterson's a third-team preseason All-American. Blake Fisher's going to be the best freshman in the country. That one I actually believe. The second one and the third one I believe. So they should have a great O-line. But again, they don't have to be elite with this kind of dynamic. And that's the part about Kyren Williams and Chris Tyree that makes them so special.
Correct.
Because you look at North Carolina last year. Does anyone want to tell me that Notre Dame's offensive line can't be as good as North Carolina's was last year.
And they had 2,000-yard runners.
2,000-yard running backs, right? So the system can help with that. And this is what I've said early on is the system can help protect you against not having that elite offensive line. Notre Dame's system has been very dependent upon an elite offensive line. What I expect Tommy Rees to do is to create a system that doesn't require the offensive line to have to carry carry things early on, which involves more RPOs, using your running backs more effectively in perimeter stuff, things like that. Those are aspects of the game that I think this staff can do schematically to take pressure off the offensive line. But to your point, Vince, having that type of 1-2 punch at running back that can make people miss, that can make something where there is nothing, is something that I think is going to make this offense so much better.
Yes,
there's no question about it.
You want to grab that super chat?
Before we go on to our next topic, Patrick has a super chat, which we sincerely appreciate. And Patrick asks, they're going to need a second productive tight end, which I agree. Any chance Kevin Bauman breaks out and becomes that guy? Patrick, we actually talked about Kevin Bauman in our sort of pre-show discussion. He was the guy that we mentioned, but honestly, the reason neither of us are going to pick a tight end in this conversation is because we expect a battle to happen. Like Vince is high on George Takis, as am I. Kevin Bauman's a guy that if healthy could be in the battle, to your question, Patrick. And then there's the freshman, especially Kane Barong, who I'm super high on.
Yeah.
So I'm not comfortable enough in knowing who even the second tight end is going to be. We thought about we could have done like, hey, something kind of like, hey, whoever the second tight end is, he's going to break out. Right. And so that's why I'm glad you did your super chat, because we weren't going to talk about that. But now that you bring it up, I think that's a thing that you look at and say, hey, I don't know who that's going to be, but I have enough confidence, number one, in the talent that Notre Dame has recruited, number two, in the ability of John McNulty to get those guys coached up, and then number three, just the system being what the system is. I expect that number two tight end to be more impactful. Now, whether or not he's going to be a breakout is going to be determined by, do they use the number two tight end more in the pass game than they did last year?
Yeah.
That's going to be the key. Because if George Takis or Kevin Bauman have like 15 to 18 catches, is that really a breakout? No, it's just doing what the last guy did, right? So that's going to be the thing for me is, do they use that guy more as a weapon? That's going to be a big question. But that's a really good question there, Patrick, and I appreciate that. And it is something that we kind of addressed before the show, but we, even Vince, who's high on George Takis, and I think he's right to be high on George Takis. It's kind of like, but are we sold enough to all of a sudden go jump him up into the breakout category?
Not yet. I'm just not.
Especially with some of these other guys we're going to talk about.
Yeah.
Is really where it come from. So very, very good question. Very good question. I appreciate that one. Appreciate that one very much, Patrick. And of course, we appreciate the super chat.
So as we push forward in our potential breakout offensive players, Brian, we're going to head out to the wide receiver position. We actually have two guys here, and we're going to talk about them one by one.
And I have a feeling people are starting to make predictions on who they think we're going to talk about. You might be a little surprised.
Yeah, so you had one and I had one. We'll go with mine first. And mine was very much brought up in the comment section, at least the ones that I read prior to the show, which, by the way, it's awesome that we get so many comments before the show even begins. But mine's Avery Davis, and I really do think – and I know that you believe that Michael Mayer is going to be the alpha in the pass game, and I don't disagree with you. But I do think that Avery Davis could be the number one wide receiver when it's all said and done. And again, Michael Mayer is going to be the alpha in the pass game, but who's going to be that alpha in the wide receiver room? And I do think that that's going to be Avery Davis from a leadership standpoint. I think that he is going to be a first option a lot of the time. I think he's got the ability to be that first option. I think he got open a lot more than he was utilized in last year. I think he's really coming into his own as far as running routes, understanding where those openings are in the zone and things of that nature. He's really becoming a wide receiver. And again, and I know that I'm maybe beating a dead horse here, but this is like his fourth position. Mm-hmm. So it takes a little while.
He's not your typical fifth-year receiver, right? I mean, he's really kind of been a receiver. This will be he's like a junior as a wide receiver,
which is when at Notre Dame, most of the receivers break out, right? So I think we're going to see that with Avery Davis. I think he is going to have a heck of a year. Now, of course, I would love to see him in like a Wildcat. I saw some guys discussing that. I think that would be a lot of fun. I'm talking about Avery Davis.
Have we brought that up in the show before?
Maybe just a couple times, but I'm talking about him just straight up wide receiver.
As a slot receiver.
As a slot receiver, putting him in motion. Yeah, you can run a reverse. You can do things of that nature, but just running routes, being that guy up the middle, because I do think they are going to attack the seam, attack the middle of the field a little bit more often, especially with Michael Mayer. And I think Avery Davis could really benefit from that as well.
So, Vince, I have a question for you about Avery. And again, you know I love that pick, right? And I've been beating the Avery Davis drum for a while, as have you. And so I like your pick, but I do have a question for you. We talk about breakout players. Avery had 24 catches last year for 322 yards, 2 touchdowns, had 3 carries for 57 yards. When you kind of in your crystal ball, like, what would a breakout season for him look like to where you would feel at the end of the year, you look forward and you kind of glimpse in the future and say, this is going to be what that breakout looks like? What would it be for you to feel like, yes, he did in fact break? I mean, obviously you could say stats don't matter because he could have similar numbers last year, but he has a bunch of impact plays. Sure. But let's just say it's also stats are part of it, and it's an all encompassing breakout. What would that look like for you numbers wise?
Well, I think he's going to have 40 plus catches. Okay, I do. I think he's going to be in the 40
range. That's almost
range.
Double. That's definitely a good jump.
I think he's going to be, because he 24 last year. I think is what you said.
Yeah,
I think he could easily get up to 40.
And I think they're going to throw it a lot more this year too. And they played one fewer game, so that'll factor into where it's not quite the double his numbers that you're talking about. I mean, there's going to be more opportunities too.
Well, and I think what do you say? He had three carries. I think that could go up a little bit, maybe by 4 or 5. I could see him in the high single digits. Yeah, and I think he could be a weapon in the red zone. So you could see that touchdown number go up as well. But I think from a catch standpoint, I think he'll be. I think whatever number. I think the number will start with a 4, whether that's low 40s. Depending on how things go in the season and how teams react to Avery Davis. I think what will benefit Avery Davis is there's other options on this offense. Yeah. He's not going to be the only target.
And no one's going to be keen on Avery Davis in the first 2-3 games of the year.
Exactly.
And that's where I think a big part of his production is going to – I think a big part of his production is going to come from in the first 4 or 5 games.
Okay.
Because and the reason I say that, yes, and as younger players start to kind of get in the rotation. But I think as teams start to say, well, we got to stop 25 or 23 and we got to stop 87. I was going to say 89. I'm like, wait a minute, get the numbers right. 87. As teams start to focus on those 2 guys, I think that's where you could see Avery kind of have, 5-6 catches each in the first, 3-4 games, and that's all of a sudden he's getting up to 20 just like that.
Right away, yeah.
Right. And so, will he continue that the entire season, which would get him to like over 60 catches? No, but I think he'll still be a weapon, but I think that'll then he won't be catching as many balls in the second half, not because he's less a part of the offense, but because now people are now having to key on him, which is going to help the run game, which is going to help the tight end get more production, which is going to help the other receivers.
Right.
So, yeah, and Jack Cohn didn't have a lot of weapons like that at Wisconsin, and I think he's going to like that. I mean, his security blanket over the middle was often his tight end or the check down. I think he's going to like having a guy like Avery Davis to throw the ball to. And we saw that in the blue gold game. I mean, we saw him. They connected 5 times, and they didn't even really play together a ton in the fourth quarter. So I think he's going to really like that weapon. And I think Avery Davis also, Vince, to your point, is going to benefit from the change in scheme, because I think some of those catches are just going to be more of those RPO type, screen type deals, which we didn't see him make a ton of. And when he did get chances on those last year, I think in the pick game they threw an RPO to him. He caught it and made a couple guys miss, got like 15 yards. Right. I think we'll see more of that stuff too. And I think the system is also going to benefit my next breakout player, which is Lawrence Keys. And, look, I've liked Lawrence Keys for a long time. I think he's a guy that the staff, for whatever reason, has just not done a good enough job finding a role for. We saw him get early playing time in 2019, and he played really well. I think he caught 13 balls that year, Vince, in 2019. I'm starting to look at it now. Caught 13 passes for 134 yards, and 7 of those catches came in the first 3 games. And he had some clutch catches. I think of that 20-plus yard one-on-one route he caught against Georgia late in the second quarter that set up a field goal. I think of the big third down catch he had in the first game against Louisville when the game was in doubt. And then, of course, we saw him in, I think it was just, I can't think of a practice highlight video we got back from Notre Dame that didn't have Lawrence Keys smoking somebody.
Yeah, you're right.
And then we get into the spring game. Okay, yeah, and then he catches 5 balls for over 100 yards. And he's catching quick routes and he's making people miss. He's catching balls down the field. He's running routes. He's a guy that has the speed to stretch the defense vertically. He's a guy to me that has been a very underutilized weapon in recent seasons. And if Tommy Rees is going to make the changes we think he's going to make with more quick game, more screens, more using isolations to create matchups, using personnel and formations and things like that to create isolations. This, to me, is your best ISO receiver. And what I mean by that, Vince, is he's such a good route runner. He's so quick, and he has better speed than people realize. I don't know if there's a receiver on the current roster that can be better used as an ISO weapon, meaning getting him in matched up against a linebacker or a safety or a nickel corner and things like that. I don't know if they have a better ISO weapon in the slot field position than Avery Davis, in my view. My hope is that they promote him and give him more opportunities to make plays, because if they do, I think he's going to reward them handsomely, because I think this kid's a really good football player.
Well, and I would love to see, not exclusively, but at times where you've got Lawrence Keys to the field and you've got Avery Davis in the slot. I think that could be –
Or even switch them. You can also bunch them.
Sure.
I mean, there's so many different things.
There's so many different things, but
right.
On the field at the same time, I guess, is the bottom line. I would love to see those guys on the field at the same time. And then, you even throw in a Braden Lindsey. You get the 3 of those guys. Now you've got quite the speed package. And then whoever you want in the backfield, whether it's Kyron Williams or Chris Tyree, and then Michael Merritt tight end, good luck.
Yeah.
Again, the possibilities are just endless with what we believe this offense can throw at defenses. And I think I feel like Tommy Rees could be just a mad scientist in the laboratory, kind of putting together, different options and different packages and things of that nature. Just from a personnel standpoint, They can run the same plays, but just switching up the personnel, and you're going to be that much more multiple. So, I love Lawrence Keys. I do. And I was really not happy that they replaced him so quickly on punt return, when he fumbled that ball and things of that nature. I think the hook was a little quick in that regard. But
that's been a frustrating thing, but that's also why Lawrence needs to step up early.
Yeah, you're right.
And have that proven track record to say, hey, we will accept a mistake here, a mistake there because of the proven track record. I think that's an important thing. And I do want to address, before we move on to the next one, why we didn't choose a couple other receivers. The reason we didn't choose Kevin Austin, we actually talked about this, and I was like, I'm not picking Kevin Austin as a breakout player, simply because there's so many unknowns regarding his current health status that I didn't feel comfortable picking him as a breakout player when I don't know if he's even be healthy enough to play a full season. Will he then be able to stay healthy? I think that's a big question, because as I told you, I do have some concerns with the foot injury. It's one of two things is going to happen, Vince. He's going to come back stronger than ever. It's just going to become a problem that never goes away. One of those, that's the only 2 options with this type of injury and this type of surgery, right? And so we're going to find out early if he is. Now, if somebody wanted to say Kevin Austin's going to be that guy, would I argue with him? No, not at all, because we all know the talent he has.
Yeah.
But I just haven't seen the kid play in 2 years. I mean, he literally hasn't played like really more than a handful of meaningful snaps since his freshman season. And even then he didn't play a whole lot. I mean, he hasn't been
meaningful as a stretch for freshman year.
Yeah. Right. But I mean, he did get some action early against Michigan, but like he hardly played at all last year. He was hurt to start the year. Then when he finally got back in the rotation, he got hurt again. And so I just need to see him do it. Now, if he breaks out, am I going to be surprised? No. But I did definitely want to go on record as saying, hey, here's the reason why we didn't pick Kevin Austin, just because of the uncertainty of the injury. But he is a guy that if we knew he was healthy, if you told me he's definitely healthy, he's been in workouts, he's great, he'd absolutely be in this conversation.
And I would have wanted to see him in the spring game. You know what I mean? Or at least in spring practice. Something.
But if my sources were like, man, he's out there working out every day. He has no workload volume issues. I mean, he's balling out and he's healthy. Then I'd have said, you know what, we should talk about Kevin Austin and breakout. But I just got to see him healthy. And then with Braden Lindsey, the reason I didn't pick him, is because it's not so much that I'm worried about him staying healthy, but I feel like we've already seen Braden Lindsey in what he can do as a breakout player. And we saw that in 2019, with the big plays he made. I mean, he had 20 some touches, and he had 6 or 7 plays of 40 plus yards in those 20 plus touches. So yes, I have some concerns about his health, but it's more about, I kind of feel like he's already a known in regards to breaking out because of what he did in 2019. It's more about just, can he be healthy and do that again at a little bit more of a higher volume is really the thing that I have with Braden Lindsey. So that's why I didn't pick him as a breakout player, Vince. I don't know if your reasoning was different, but that was the reason he wasn't in my list. It
was similar. I mean, the injury thing is definitely part of the equation. I mean, it just is. But you're right. I think we've seen what he can do, and I don't foresee him having a bigger impact than he did in 2019 necessarily.
A little bit more volume, but
with more volume, he could. We've seen it. We've seen him do it. So I think he's only limited by the injury and by usage, like the way they're going to use him. So
now, if he is a breakout player, this offense is going to be nasty. And when I mean breakout player, what I mean is not doing what he did in 2019, but just with more volume. So maybe he goes from 25 touches in a shorter period of time to 35, 40 touches. But I mean, if he goes 50 plus touches this year, then that means he broke out in a big, big way. And that's what I'm not predicting yet, just because I don't know if he can be that guy at this point in time. But if he is, and that's what I thought he could be when Notre Dame signed him, he could probably have a bigger impact than anybody we're discussing here, in my opinion. If he truly has that big step forward, I honestly don't think that, because you're bringing Chris Tyree-ish speed as a perimeter guy, which totally changes the way the defense would have to defend Notre Dame.
Correct. No
and
question.
that would mean 40 to 50 snaps a game for 12 games in the regular season. You know what I mean? And then consistent production. I don't know if Braden Lindsey can be that guy, but if he is, then I think he impacts this offense more than anybody else. So let's get back on track to the guys we actually did pick. and Vince, your next guy is obviously it's going to be an interesting one, and it was the first comment we had in the chat when we got in there.
Yes,
we were actually in the so as soon as I made the chat, we got in it and we were kind of going over things, and Jordan Schreiber jumped in immediately as we were talking, and we saw him post this, and he said, breakout player Jack Cohn for 4,000 plus yards. Now, Jordan has said that several times, Vince, and I don't know about 4,000 yards, but he is definitely a guy that you have as a breakout player. And then I'm going to explain why I don't have him as a breakout player. Because people are like, wait, Driscoll, you're the guy that's been banging the Jack Cohn drum since they got him. What's going on? I'll explain. But anyway, go ahead and explain why you have Jack Cohn as a breakout player.
No, I'm also not ready to say 4,000 yards. I'm not quite there.
I just wonder if the Notre Dame offense is capable of doing that.
Right.
I mean, that's kind of my thing. I mean, 4,000 yards is a lot of yards.
So there's a lot of reasons that I picked Jack Cohn, and I number one is I get to sit across from you and listen to you talk about Jack Cohn and how much you love him.
That's called indoctrination.
And eventually it just starts just sweeping over me. Yes, it's indoctrination. That's right. Yes. So that's part of it. But no, I do believe. Look, I think that he could be the perfect quarterback for what they want to do with this offense. Okay. And I hate to make this comparison, but it's similar to what Alabama did last year. Their quarterback was a distributor. He got the ball in the hands of the playmakers. Now, he had to have the cojones to fit it into some small windows and to make some throws that the previous quarterback at Notre Dame was unwilling or just didn't make. However you want, whatever you want to say, the throws didn't get made. I think Jack Cohn is willing to make a lot of those throws. And I think we've seen it in his film at Wisconsin. I think we saw a little bit of it in the spring game. I think we saw a little bit of it in the clips during spring. I think he's going to make those throws, or at the very least attempt those throws. And you and I have had that conversation.
They don't beat that out of him. That's my only concern.
There is that. But you and I have had the conversation that, just because you throw deep doesn't mean you have to complete it. You need to throw deep to show that you're willing to throw deep, right? I mean, it's all of that combined. And I think Jack Cohn is willing and able to do all of those things. And I think he is going to do all of those things. I'm going to hope that they're not going to beat that out of him. He's only there for a year. He's coming in with a lot of, preconceived ideas of how to play the quarterback position. And I think that he is I don't know if I want to use the word gunslinger, right? But he is willing to make some of those throws that we haven't seen at Notre Dame in the past few years. So for that reason, I like him as a breakout. And look, he's going to be the quarterback at Notre Dame, right? If they go on a winning streak, which I think that they have a very good chance of doing, they're favored in every game except the Wisconsin game, which I think is ridiculous, right? It was 1.5 last time I looked that they're not favored by. If he can take Notre Dame and put them, on a winning streak and they're ranked in the top 5, all of that, he's going to be the guy that they're going to be talking about, right? Because he's the quarterback of an undefeated team who is, has put up the numbers, because I do believe he's going to put up numbers because he's going to get the ball in the hands of the right guys. I think this offense is going to be able to put up some numbers. I'm not ready to go out and predict what those numbers are going to be, but I think they could be better than last year.
You're not doing that because we're going to have a show about that. I like what you did there. There you go.
So I think Jack Cohn is poised to be a breakout player because of the weapons that he has around him, because of the offense that he is going to be engineering, and for the fact that I believe that he's going to make some of the throws that we have been begging the Notre Dame quarterback to make over the last 2 years. So I think he's got a great chance to be a big, big reason why Notre Dame is successful offensively this year.
Yeah, I'm all on board for that. I didn't pick him as one of my 3 because, number one, I'm going to save more conversation about him for a future topic that we're going to cover here very soon. But I don't disagree with anything you said. My only thing as far as breakout is, if I didn't think about it in the way you just did, so you're looking at it from sort of a perception breakout, as much as, statistically he's going to see a jump if he's what we think he's going to be, because Notre Dame's going to throw it more than he did at Wisconsin. But you're also talking about you're the quarterback of Notre Dame, so there's going to be a perception, and I didn't think about that. That's a really good point, because the way I looked at it is, he's already won 10 games as starting quarterback and led a team to a Rose Bowl.
Oh, absolutely.
And they lost by like a point to a guy that was a top 10 NFL draft pick and was the NFL Rookie of the Year, Offensive Rookie of the Year last year. So that's kind of where I was looking at it, is like, he's kind of already done that. But to your point, that earned him zero respect because of, I'm seeing top 25 quarterback rankings come out and Jack Cohn's not on there. Guys who've never started a game before on there, but Jack Cohn's not on there, right? And so, yeah, to your point, I think there's still a disrespect about him because, that team was all about Jonathan Taylor. And Jonathan Taylor was a huge part of that team.
Sure. But
Jack Cohn made some big-time throws in that season. And, you look at the Minnesota game, which was their biggest regular season win of the year. That was Jack Cohn doing work in that game, not necessarily the running game. So I didn't really think about that point, Vince. I think that's a really good point to make about, it's not just about the production. It's about that production at Notre Dame is going to equal this in regards to reception or perception. And that kind of leads to what we've talked recently about, the Heisman thing. We did a little answer to a question about recently whether or not Jack Cohn could be a Heisman candidate. And the point that I've made is, if Ian Book can be a top 10 Heisman finalist, and he was like 8th or 9th this past year.
Yeah.
With really pedestrian numbers, when you consider, this isn't a shot at Ian Book, but anyone that's paying attention looks at the numbers he put up last year, compares them to what most Heisman finalists, not finalists, but, top 10 guys put up, and it's not
guys in the conversation.
He threw 15 touchdowns, and it wasn't like he had Eric Crouch-like numbers as a runner,
Exactly.
So I think that if that can happen, what can Jack Cohn do with 3,000 plus yards if he's to get there, and 30 or so touchdowns kind of thing, and hopefully do it in a way that's unlike what we saw in 2019, where it was like 17 of those touchdowns came in like 4 games against really bad teams. Right. And so hopefully it's production in the bigger games as well. But yeah, it's a really interesting take, Vince, that I didn't even think about is even if his numbers don't take a monstrous jump, his perception is going to be so much different.
Right.
And that's a really good observation.
I just think he is so flying under the radar right now nationally that I think that, he's going to be a breakout when it comes to his perception. And that's one of the reasons I love doing these kind of topics, because and also why I love coming up with our list before we talk to each other, because the parameters, they're just kind of
Try
wide
to keep
open.
them as open as you want to
Yeah.
be, so that makes it a little bit more interesting conversation.
Absolutely. So Jack Cohn is my last guy. Your last guy is very interesting. And when we talked about him in the pregame,
You did this. You went like this.
I was like, but then you explained it to me. I was like, okay, yeah. And I also think this is a bit of a perception guy as well.
Exactly.
And so that's why I think it's interesting. Our last two, they're both perception, but we both didn't see it on the other guy at first. So go ahead and give your last guy, Brian.
It's Jarrett Patterson.
Yeah.
And it's hilarious to me that number one, Jarrett Patterson's been pretty good the last 2 years, right? Yeah. We all know that. But he hasn't been like an elite player. I mean, he was a honorable mention All-American last year. I think he was like second or third team All-ACC. He wasn't necessarily considered like – he wasn't a Liam Eichenberg. He wasn't a Robert Hainsey. He wasn't an Aaron Banks kind of guy with the honors and the accolades. And then you come into this season and everybody's like, Kane Madden's their best offensive lineman, which I'm like, okay, I don't – whatever. So when I look at Jarrett Patterson, I say, whether he's a center or a guard, this is true no matter what position he plays. My opinion of him as a breakout is true no matter what position he plays. But I look at Jarrett Patterson, his first year he had some ups and downs of a typical redshirt freshman, but you loved the potential. And I thought he finished the season off well. Last year we sort of saw I didn't think he played great early in the year. He was good, but he didn't make the jump that I thought he was going to make. But the games leading into the game where he was injured against BC, he was playing the best football of his career, I felt. And he was really starting to take that next step as a player from just a physicality standpoint. He was moving people more, execution standpoint. His just overall effectiveness was just really starting to explode. And there was a couple games before he got hurt where I thought him and Liam Eichenberg graded out as their two best linemen, or he was right on par with like Hainsey in my opinion. And so I think I think the injury is one of those things that obviously hurt that ability to kind of, if he would have been able to finish the season off strong and play against Clemson and play against Alabama, I think his perception right now would be a lot different, because I felt like he was really ascending at that time when he got hurt. So when you look at him now and you say, okay, another year older, another year stronger, I think the injury is going to benefit him in this regard, where it hurt him in another. It's going to benefit him in this regard. A lot of times when you have a lower body injury, the work you have to put in for rehab and to come back from that can actually result in you getting a jump in explosiveness, because you have to focus so much on that lower body and building up that lower body and the muscles around it, and really focusing on getting the agility back and the footwork back and things like that, that sometimes you can see guys kind of take a little bit of an even bigger jump than you otherwise might have seen. So I think we're going to see that this year. I think he's going to become more of a leader of the unit this year, and not just a leader from the standpoint of like the players knew he was a leader, but also from a perception standpoint, and maybe more of a little bit of a vocal leader this year. So I think that's part of it as well. And I think he's going to go from being like a second to third team All-ACC type of guy to a first team to second team All-American type of player. That's what I think we're going to see from Jarrett Patterson, where he's going to be one of the best offensive linemen in the country. Whereas last year, he was at best their third best lineman. Right. So it's hard for me to say you were an elite player when you were the third best lineman on your team. Now, again, part of that is because of how good Robert Hainsey and Liam Eichenberg were. Right. But I actually felt that he outplayed Aaron Banks a lot last year because he was more consistent than Aaron Banks. So consistency is Jarrett's always he's never played bad. When I say he didn't play as well as I expected, it was just more of he wasn't dominating. I don't know if he maybe has like one bad game his whole career. It's just, he has this kind of level of consistency, but now I think that consistency is going to be up here. It's just going to be a higher level of consistency. And then I think we're going to see more dominant moments from him. So I really do believe that. Now, whether or not that's going to happen is going to partly be dependent upon what position they put him at and then what's around him. Mm-hmm. And my fear about this prediction is sort of what we had with Drew White last year, where do you have him trying to spend so much time focusing on other people and getting everybody else right, that his game takes a step back? I hope that doesn't happen. I felt like we saw that a little bit from Sam Musfer in 2018. I felt like in 2017 was Sam Musfer's best year because he had Alex Bars and he had Quentin Nelson beside him, right? Or I mean, you didn't have to really worry about you just go do your job, buddy. And Q's got all that. Well, then in 2018, you don't have Quentin Nelson anymore. And you've got a new guy there at left guard, and all these changes are happening. Because then you move Alex Bars over to left guard. You got a new right guard. It's just there was a lot of changes, and I felt like sometimes Sam was too worried about helping the guys beside him, that he couldn't focus on his game. And then when Alex Bars got hurt, and he had two new guys beside him, I felt that hurt Sam's game. That's my fear with Jarrett Patterson is that, does he have to spend so much time helping everybody else around him that it affects his game? That was my one thing that gave me pause about picking him. But at the end of the day, I was like, I think this kid's too good. I think he's too athletic. I think he's too talented. And I think he is in a position where he's going to really step up and become a nationally recognized player as opposed to just the Notre Dame fan base knowing he's really good. The rest of college football is going to know he's really good.
Well, and if you remember, a couple points here. So he was always kind of the fifth lineman that people would talk about because he wasn't one of the four that was going to be draft eligible, like that was going to be leaving, right? So he was always kind of the afterthought. Everybody, 4 out of the 5 are gone. 4 out of the 5 are gone. Well, there's still one left, and he's pretty darn good.
He's really good, yeah.
The people just
I think his
forget
injury
about
kind
him.
of factored in that too because we didn't see him late in the year.
And talking about the injury, when we had an opportunity to talk to some of the linemen, what they were saying about Jarrett Patterson, we lost the captain of our line.
Right.
Like that spoke volumes to me.
They knew that, and they told that to us, but that wasn't necessarily the perception nationally.
Right. That's what I'm saying. Yes,
right.
That's exactly right. And that just highlights the importance of who Jarrett Patterson was on that line because there were 2 guys on that line that actually had the C on their jerseys.
And were legitimate leaders. It's not like
100%.
Those guys only had it just because they were veterans. They earned that seat.
And they were looking at Jarrett Patterson as a leader
during
on
the
offensive line. During the game.
Yes.
Right.
Now I think Jarrett takes that leadership and it expands.
Yes.
I think that's going to help him
a
lot.
So, the perception angle is very interesting to me for both Jack Cohn and Jarrett Patterson.
And I do think
I
think Jarrett Patterson is going to play a lot better, too. This isn't just about perception. I actually think his game's going to take another level.
Sure.
As to your point, Vince, you made a comment, I think, was it earlier today or was it off there? I sometimes forget. But you made a comment, the third year is sort of that money year for linemen at Notre Dame.
Right.
Ronnie Stanley was inconsistent, but showed potential in 2013 and 14. Then year 3, he really breaks out. Quentin Nelson was really good as a redshirt freshman, really good as a redshirt sophomore. But then you think, well, how much better can that guy get? And then in 2017, he showed us how much better he can get. Mike McGlinchey was a little spotty as a redshirt junior at 2016. Was a second team All-American, but he had some inconsistent moments. Then he comes out in 2017, which was his third full year as a starter, because remember, he only started 1 game in 14, and he takes his game to another level. Liam Eichenberg, consistent in 2018, pretty steady in 2019, pretty steady player, not dominant, comes out in his third year as a starter, and he's dominant, and he's a first-team All-American. So we've seen that consistently from Notre Dame. Even Zach Martin, who was just otherworldly in 2013, it was 2012 when Zach Martin had his true breakout, which was his third year as starting left tackle. So I think that third year is when we've really seen that money year for players. And Jarrett's walking into that now. And that's another reason why I look at it and say, if the O-line tradition is continuing from where it was, then this should be the year that we really see Jarrett Patterson take that big, big jump as a player.
So those are our breakout players offensively for this coming season, especially coming out of spring and what we're able to see and not see. Tomorrow we're going to do the defensive side of the ball and who we think those breakout players are going to be. And I'm very interested to see what Brian comes up with.
Yeah.
We have not shared
those yet, but we will talk about it. But so the way this is going to work, we're going to wrap up that part of the show now. And we're going to answer questions next. So this is kind of what our format's going to be. It's similar to what we've done in the past, but we're going to have more of these here coming up. So if you're going to take off now, which I don't think you should, we get great questions and they spark some really good conversation. Make sure you hit the like button. Make sure you hit the subscribe button. Make sure you hit the notification bell. Check out irishbreakdown.com. And if you're listening via podcast, please make sure you leave us a 5-star review. So that's going to wrap up the breakout players. Now that we've had the spring, the breakout players that we see for Notre Dame in for the upcoming 2021 season. And so now, Vince, it's time to do questions.
Yes.
So we're going to dive into, we just wrapped up our offense or our breakout players for offense part. Now let's dive into questions. We've got a lot of good questions, and we got some comments too that people are going to want to make regarding the topic of conversation today. So we'll talk about those as well.
Which I like.
Yep.
Okay, so the first one here by OC Irish fan. Coach D, are nationally recruited athletes aware of IB and possibly watch the show? Thanks for the deep dive into Notre Dame recruiting and team development. Love the Notre Dame.
I have no idea, honestly, to be honest. I don't know. I've never
had
asked.
One comment, right?
We know for a fact that Keon Keeley is aware of our show.
Yeah.
And so I didn't know if that was actually him or somebody just kind of pretending to be him. But so I reached out to him and said, hey, thanks for joining the chat and all that. And he responded as if it was him. So I was like, okay, cool. So I honestly don't know. I mean, if they have, they don't talk about it, but I don't. Hey, do you listen to our show? Just wondered. It'd be kind of cool to know if they did or didn't, but honestly, I doubt that many of them do. I don't think college kids really care about that.
I don't think they have the attention span.
Well, I don't know if that. I just don't think it's like when I was in college, right? We played ball, and when I wasn't playing ball, I wanted to hang out. I wanted to play Madden. I wanted to play NCAA. I wanted to go, do other things. Right. And sometimes you just need to shut that down too. It's like you're around it so much that you just want to. The last thing I would have, and they didn't really have this when I was a kid, but the last thing I would have wanted to do was go listen to some podcast to somebody that I don't know critiquing me or criticizing my game.
Sure.
I probably wouldn't have wasted my time with that. Not that I think we're being very fair with our criticisms, but I wouldn't have listened to that when I was a kid. But if they are, great. Glad that they listen. Appreciate it. Always feel free to hit me up on DM if you don't think I'm, and I've had a couple kids do that, which I think is awesome. I've had a couple kids over the years be like, hey, I read this thing that you said about me and I want to discuss it with you. I'm like, cool, go for it. That's one of the reasons I leave my DMs open, right? Is
you said a couple of parents have done that too, right?
Yeah. Well, usually of recruits, and they've become close friends of mine.
Right.
Like, well, hey, I want to talk to you about this because I think what they recognize is that the criticisms, and I've tried to get even better with this, is the criticisms are always about football. It's rarely that I will criticize someone for their character, but when I do, I mean it, and I'm confident that I'm accurate in that information because I've gotten it from enough people. But those have led to some fun conversations, and that's why I keep my DMs open. That's why I keep my email address about as simple as it can be. It's brian@irishbreakdown.com, because I feel like our job is to hold the program accountable for its strive to be a champion. And I have always felt like I always laugh when like media people get like criticized and they all kind of like lose their minds. Like, oh my gosh, can't believe you're criticizing the media. Well, that's what we do.
Right.
So why can't people push back on us? Now push back in the manner in which we push back on you.
Professional way.
Right. Don't get personal and start throwing out insults. But, if I'm criticizing your game, you think I'm wrong. Let's talk ball. Let's have this conversation. And like, for example, there was a defensive coordinator from Notre Dame a few years ago that I had written an article about something, and I had said that I thought this was a mistake. And he hit me up and he's like, hey, just so you know, on that play that you said this was actually our coverage. This is what happened. Let's talk through. And then I know, okay, now that helps me understand the coverage structure of what they're trying to do. Right. And so those are things like there was one time I wrote about there was a blown coverage, and I said, this is either this guy or this guy. I'm not sure which one. And I had somebody reach out and say, hey, just so you know, this was who that was on. It was on him. So I do think that there are parents that listen, and maybe occasionally kids will listen, but the response I've gotten from players are usually responses that I've either had in a written article or a tweet, which is much easier for them to consume than a podcast. It's a really good question. Never really thought about that, to be honest with you.
Bruce Shearer, do players communicate with each other? For example, would Anderson have tweeted other receivers he was headed to Oregon? Usually
there's knowledge of that. Mm-hmm. I mean, we normally get a heads up for kids going to commit somewhere, and a lot of times it's from a player or a parent. Hey, just so you know, so-and-so is going to commit somewhere. So, where'd you hear that? Yeah, my son and him were tweeting the other day. Yeah. So, I mean, does that mean he tweeted all of his friends or DM'd all of his friends about where he was going? Probably not, but there's probably a few people that had an idea that he was going to do that. Yeah.
All right, lots of comments here about who people think is going to be the breakout. So I'll kind of roll through these, Brian. Notre Dame 2164, Chris Tyree. I'm so high on this kid. His ceiling is limitless. Let's see, Old Grim. He says, what else can be expected anytime soon? I assume that's recruiting. Let it play out. Can I say that?
Yeah, I would be surprised if we don't have another show to do, an extra show to do in the next week.
Oh, all right. Clear the calendar. Let's see. Lucas Chapman, Avery Davis is going to have a huge year regardless of which QB starts. Agreed completely. Because I think he's going to be a focal point in the offense. That's why I picked him. I mean, there is no question about that.
And I think the game of the top the two returning quarterbacks is very similar to each other. So, like, if Jack Cohn goes down and Drew Pine takes over, or Jack Cohn struggles and Drew Pine steps in, or Drew Pine beats out Jack Cohn, whatever form you want to go with that, they're very similar in what they do. Tyler Buckner as a passer is going to be very similar to what they do. What the dynamic that Tyler Buckner brings to the game that those two don't is the running part. But as a passer, I don't think the offense changes much. To Lucas's question, I don't think the offense changes much no matter who. It's not like Ian Book and Brandon Wimbush, two different players.
Completely
Ian Book, Phil
different.
Dracovic, two different players. These three guys from a pass game standpoint are all sort of in a similar ballpark. I mean, this guy's a little bit better here than there, but as far as the type of offense they can thrive on, it's very similar. And so I think that's a very good observation. And this next question, I think we'll address the first part is this is a good one because we didn't take Michael Mayer.
Yes. So Matty K 55, Michael Mayer, Avery Davis on offense, and either Jack Kaiser or Houston Griffith on defense. Some of my picks here. So we're gonna do defense tomorrow. So I'll let that sleeping dog lie for 24 hours.
All I'm gonna say is I like where his head's at on the defense.
Yes, so do I. So I'm not going to say who I picked yet, but he says Michael Mayer, Avery Davis on offense. So we did not select Michael Mayer, and I think we're on the same page on this, Brian, but go ahead and give your reasons as to why.
Part of my reason is there's going to be another show we're going to talk about where Michael Mayer is going to be a focal point, and I don't want to get into a situation, and this is partly why we did have the conversation before today's show to make sure that we understood where we were going with this, to say, hey, look, there's actually a couple subjects coming up that I think you could talk about Michael Mayer. So we're going to talk a lot about Michael Mayer. But the other reason is we could have probably talked about him, and his criteria is going to be very similar to what I said about Jarrett Patterson. Yes, he was very good last year, but he's going to jump into that All-American status. I think that when you look at Michael Mayer's perception nationally, if he does what we think he's going to do, he's absolutely going to be a breakout player, just like we talked about Jack Cohn and Jarrett Patterson, maybe even more. And part of the reason for me is I think the national people that aren't ranking him as one of the best tight ends don't have a clue what they're doing or what they're talking. I mean, for Pro Football Focus, to not only they have him as not in his top 10, but they didn't have him as the next guy to watch. It's like, what are you doing? Like, you need to find new people to do what you do. If you don't have Kyron Williams and Chris Tyree in your Kyron Williams and Michael Mayer in your top 10 of returning position players in the country, then I just no longer care about your opinion. Because it's faulty.
Right.
So based on that, though, however, I mean, that perception is there that there are some people that don't view Michael Mayer as one of the best tight ends in the country coming back. Then, yes, he will be a breakout player. So we could have definitely gone with him. But my big reason, Vince, was, number one, I already think he was excellent.
I think he broke out last year. Yeah.
But I do think he'll take it to another level. Number two, there's a couple more shows coming up where we're going to talk about All-American candidates. We're going to have a show where we're going to predict All-Americans. He's definitely going to be talked about then. We're going to have a show where we kind of talk about sophomores that we think are going to have an impact on the team this year. We're going to talk about them then. I just didn't get it because, honestly, we could kind of have Michael Mayer in every single offensive show we do. I mean, we could. So
unless it's about an offensive player that we don't think is going to have a good season, that he would not be involved there. But,
or something about a veteran, something like that.
Right.
We could do him. So that honestly, for me, that was a big reason why I didn't have him in there.
John Long says, I'm on the Avery Davis bandwagon. I sincerely believe he's our top wideout with 45-plus catches and legit game-changing performances in more than one game. He'll be a big part of any win if any reason we win a big game, I'm guessing is what that meant at the end. So I agree.
He has some more follow-ups if you want to continue those. They're just down 2 more spots.
Yes, right here. He says, would really love to see Avery Davis in the Wildcat package in a big game only that catches the opposing defense completely off guard.
And the reason he put all that long stuff is because John had to bounce.
Yes, it's got to go. Listen to the podcast later. Subscribe, share. Coach D equals best in the business.
And the thing I like about when people say Coach D like that, they can really be referring to either one of us.
I'm just saying.
So when he says that, I mean, you're Coach D, I'm Coach D.
It works.
I'm the original. I'm just joking. I'm the original Coach D. That's just because I'm older. I'm just older. You know,
you were coaching before me, I would imagine.
Yeah.
So, it is what it is. Coleman Smith says, offense, I think it will be Lorenzo Styles Jr.
Yep.
And then he's got a defensive pick of Shane Simon.
Yeah,
so Lorenzo Styles
that's quite a deal to have a freshman break out like that over a lot of other really good receivers. That would be very interesting. Very interesting, no question about it.
Brent Byers, he's got a spicy take. It's Tyler Buckner.
That's kind of like the Coleman one. That's very interesting.
Yeah,
we will have a freshman show, sort of a newcomer show, but yeah. That's Brent and Coleman coming with the outside the box thinking today. I'm digging it. I like it. And I'd be shocked if it was either one of those guys. Just because of the players that they'd have to surpass. Mm-hmm. Either A, those guys are even better than we think, or B, a lot of stuff went wrong and they were forced into the lineup. And now I think Lorenzo needs to play this year. No question about it. He needs to play. Deion Colsey needs to play. I will be saying about those two guys what I said about Xavier Watson, Jordan Johnson last year, and Kevin Austin and Lawrence Keys and Braden Lindsey in 2018. And you need to get these guys in the field some way, shape, form, or fashion. I'm not saying they need to start. I'm not saying they need to catch 100 balls this year, but they need to play from game one on. They have to be part of what you're doing. But to then go to that to where they're going to be breakout players, that would surprise me a little bit. But I could dig it. I could dig it.
Brent follows up. He says, I could see Chris Tyree blowing the top off this year, game-breaking speed, hitting some really long runs for touchdowns, piling up impressive yardage. Tommy Guns jumping in. My vote is for Avery Davis all day and Vince's guy at corner.
Yeah, which we'll get there tomorrow.
We'll get there tomorrow. We'll see. We'll see.
Come on. I've already got the graphic made for tomorrow's show, and he's the lead guy. Because if you don't pick him tomorrow, then I'm going to have a problem.
Yeah, that's possibly a good choice on your part.
Yeah, it's just interesting. The Brent's next comment. I want to get to.
At 1 o'clock there.
Yeah,
he says they should start Buckner. They won't though. They aren't worried about throwing Buckner into the fire next September against a ridiculously stacked Ohio State team. Will be interesting.
I don't think they should start Tyler Buckner. They should only start Tyler Buckner if Tyler Buckner is their best quarterback. And most talented doesn't equal best, right? I mean that's I don't see why. I guess I don't understand. Part of it is I don't think that Jack Cohn's a good football player. Drew Pine's a good football player. Yes, Tyler Buckner's a great player, but Trevor Lawrence is the anomaly, right? We have to all understand that. He's the anomaly. I mean, as good as Tua Tagovailoa did, he didn't play. And I didn't think Jalen Hurts was that great of a player. He didn't play as a freshman. Justin Fields didn't play as a freshman. I mean, the play Justin Fields is most known for as a true freshman was on a freaking stupid fake punt in the SEC title game. Remember that dumb call by Kirby Smart? So Kyler Murray, played as a freshman and struggled, transferred, and so – playing as Sam Darnold didn't play as a freshman. Playing as a freshman is rare. And I feel like because of what Trevor Lawrence did, there's now this, now everyone should do that. Trevor Lawrence is one of the greatest quarterbacks we've seen coming out of high school the last 10 to 15 years. Not everyone should be. Trevor Lawrence didn't miss two of his previous 3 years of high school, 2 of his last 3 years of high school. We got to pump the brakes on Tyler Buckner. Not that he's not incredibly talented. He is. But I feel like we're putting so much pressure on him and they should start him. And if they don't, it's a coaching mistake. No, it's not. And look, this coming from a dude that has no problem criticizing the coaching staff, especially on offense, no problem with it. And also a guy that has no problem pushing for saying younger players need to play more. That's a different deal. Not just because Tyler's talent, because it is there. It's the circumstances that the kid has not played a live game of football. It'll be almost 2 years when this season starts. It was in 2019. And so we just got to pump the brakes. And just because his first start is against Florida State or against Ohio State in 2022 doesn't mean that's going to be the first real snap he's taken. We've advocated for he needs to have a role, right?
Yes.
If he's as talented as I think he is and you think he is, Vince, there needs to be a role for him.
Agreed.
But that doesn't mean you need to start him. Tim Tebow didn't start as a freshman.
He had a role.
He was a 5-star, but he had a role. And so that's, to me, where I want to see Tyler Buchner, and then that's going to get him experience for 2022.
Mm-hmm.
But if his first start is against Ohio State in 2022, here's the deal. If they lose to Ohio State to start that season, that's not the end of the world. Remember, Ohio State lost to Virginia Tech by 2 touchdowns in like their second or third game of the year in 2014 and still made the playoff and still won the national championship, right? That's going to be a baptism by fire as a starter if it is his first start, but that's okay. And let's not act like Ohio State is going to have Trevor Lawrence a quarterback that year, right? Ohio State's going to be excellent, but Ohio State is not, it's not like Notre Dame's not going to have a lot of excellent players too. And so, I mean, does he need to play? Am I going to feel good about him starting that game if he gets like no real reps this season? Yeah, I'm going to be real nervous about it. But that's what we should be focusing on, is finding that role for Tyler Buchner, not saying that they should start Tyler Buchner, who we've seen throw zero real college passes. And that's come from someone who thinks he's a 5-star. You can leave that up, Vince. I mean, I had him as an elite player.
Sure.
Right? I mean, he's an elite talent. But freshman quarterbacks playing and winning titles and competing for titles is rare. And you have a guy in front of him who took his team to the Rose Bowl, who had a lead over Ohio State in the Big Ten title game at halftime. Right? So it's not like we're talking about they're playing some bum, right? I mean, Jack Cohn's a football player.
Yeah, Jason Rose backs you up there. He said Jack Cohn did go to the Rose Bowl and almost beat Justin Herbert, who is the rookie of the year in the NFL. John Long says, don't sell these guys short. This team needs to compete. The QB has guts. Watch the film. Playmaker at every offensive skill position. This team needs to try and win it now. Yeah. Look, I would have a problem if they weren't trying to win it now. I mean, you want to try to win it every year. Like, right? I never would subscribe to the theory of, we're just rebuilding. It's no big deal. Whatever.
Not in year 12.
No, not at all. And not with the way that they're recruiting and the way that they're doing things. I would not subscribe to that in any way, shape, or form.
Justin, that doesn't mean Tyler Buchner can't win the job.
Right.
But he needs to only start if he's just flat out better than everyone. And again, I don't mean more talented. I mean better.
Better now.
If he can execute the offense and make more plays than the older players, then he should play. Because again, the receiver argument, you never heard me say Jordan Johnson should start. You never heard me say Xavier Watts should start. I just said they should have a role. And it's the same thing with Tyler Buchner.
Okay. Justin Nagel says, off work, kids playing outside, smoking some meat, sipping on something cold, waiting for the boys to start the stream. The good life. Go Irish.
Yep. We're ready to rock and roll. We're still there. We just now got to. We started the show a little bit late, but yeah. So that's a good one. Justin Nagel, my man.
Coleman Smith says, think of how well freshmen have played under BK. Everett Golson, I agree. Brent Byers. They should give Buchner a shot. Again,
and that voice is gonna get louder and louder. And if they do give him a role, and I want to go to old Grimm's comment next because I thought that was interesting. But even if they do give him a role and he plays well in that role, it's only going to make those calls louder. And that's fine. I hope he does play great, but I just feel like we're overlooking the fact that there's 2 pretty talented and really good quarterbacks on the roster that have experience as well. You got
Brandon says, I got the whole week off of work. So pumped to be here every day on time for the entire show.
Hey, I'm going to pull up old Grimm's question.
Oh, okay. Go ahead.
Yeah. So, or his comment more. So he says the O-line is being picked on so much. I think they take it as a challenge. I hope they do. Old Grimm. Me too. I really do. And if that's the thing I hope that Jeff Quinn has heard everything I've said about him this offseason. And I hope the players have heard. I hope Kane Madden's listened to every podcast I've done where I said I don't think the kid can play. I hope they take all that, and I hope that it adds fuel to their fire and that they go out and prove and play great this year to spite me. If that's what it takes for this line to play great, which I think if this line plays at a high level, this offense is going to be really good because the playmakers are there. The quarterback is there. The line is still my question. But if Olgrim is right, they take it as a challenge. And what he didn't say is they then answer that challenge. I hope they take it as a challenge, and then I hope they answer it. That's what I hope.
Couple comments about, I guess, some vacations. Went kayaking with the family last week. Got behind on the show. Wow, did I miss a lot. And Brian's deer in the headlight look was hysterical. I don't know what that means, but I think that's great.
Without you on the show, it's just like going through the finding questions. Like, okay, you guys have been chatting for 75 minutes, and
That's great. Okay, that makes a lot more sense.
I really miss Vince. So yeah,
that makes a lot more sense.
I don't appreciate the shot that my guy Brian's taking at me right there, but he ain't wrong either. So.
That's great, though. And then he says, welcome back, Vince. That makes all the sense in the world. Do you want to grab that super chat down there, Brian?
Yep. This is from Richard Maltby. Richard, appreciate it very, very much. Happy 5th of July, gentlemen.
Yes.
I have a feeling a lot of the offensive talent on the board are waiting to see what the offense is going to look like prior to committing. Reese needs to produce. I think it's a great option. I don't know if that's definitely what they are waiting for, but to Richard's point, I think that is going to be the – people have asked, what can Tommy Reese do to take this offensive recruiting to the next level? That's it right there.
Yes.
Put a big-time product on the field. And even if they would have had a good offense this past year, he's still a first-year coordinator.
You need to see it stick.
You need to see some of that. Whereas Marcus Freeman can say, hey, look, I had a top 20 defense the last 2 years. I've been a D coordinator here, and here. Look what we've done. Tommy Reese is still he's barely in his first, out of his first year as an offensive coordinator. If he can go into the offseason or not even the offseason, just the close of 2022 where they've put up 40 points a game and they're throwing the ball with the RPOs in the ways that we think they are. I look at it and I say, boy, Vince, now because Tommy works, he's got a personality that kids relate to. I mean, we hear more recruits at all positions talk about Tommy Reese than usually they do about their position coach, which A, is a problem and explains why the offense isn't recruiting the way the defense is. But B, to look at the positive side of it, is he's making an impact. Mm-hmm. But that's only going to take you so far. If, hey, man, I love Tommy Reese, but Notre Dame scored 33 points a game last year, and I'm going to go to Oklahoma, who scored 40 whatever points a game last year. Hey, I love Tommy Reese, but they scored 33 points a game last year, barely threw for over 200 yards a year. I'm going to go ahead and go to Ohio State, who scored 45 points a game last year and throws for almost 300 yards a game, right? And so that's if Tommy then gets that product behind him with the work ethic, with the personality, with the intelligence, now all of a sudden that's going to help him close. Of course, the other thing he's still going to need is the assistant coaches to do a better job. But I think that's a great observation, Richard, and that could be something that helps Notre Dame flip a kid or two. Because this is the thing. When you look at Notre Dame, I hope that some of these guys that they really want, just because they commit somewhere else, doesn't mean you should stop recruiting them, right? And then if you do put a good product on the field like we think they can, now all of a sudden your ability to flip that is even better. And Richard, by the way, man, I really appreciate that super chat. That's big time, man. I appreciate that very, very much, very much. It's a great observation and question, and they're going to need it. They're going to really need it. And to finish this, the 2023 class has a chance to be special. And there's some offensive weapons on the board at quarterback and receiver that this Richard's point could be especially important for. Even maybe not the 2022 class.
Right. I think it's much more important for 2023.
But you look like Dante Moore. If you look like Cardinal Tate, you look at Jalen Brown, Deuce Robinson, Jackson Howard, some of those type of guys, the running backs, that's the thing to me that could have a big impact on whether or not you can land the kind of offensive talent that you want the next couple of years. Huge impact on it.
Trey Taylor jumping in with a very interesting question. Who in the program do we believe can create offense with the ball in their hands? I think this is a pretty decent list. Kyron Williams, Chris Tyree, Lawrence Keys, Avery Davis, Kevin Austin when he's healthy.
To a degree, a little bit different with size.
Yeah, right. Braden Lindsey, when he's healthy, 100% healthy. Tyler Buckner.
It's an interesting one. That's a
field, right.
I would probably throw Lorenzo Styles in there too.
Okay. Yep. Xavier Watts.
Oh, definitely Xavier Watts. How do I forget my guy?
I know, that's your guy, man.
Xavier Watts. My concern moving forward is a lot of those guys are going to be gone soon.
Sure.
And that's a bit of an issue.
Why 23 is so important.
Right. And why I wanted Xavier Bradshaw, but I'm willing to wait to see what they do in 2023. But that's also why it's so important that they make the changes, Trey, on offense this year to an offense that is geared more towards that type of athlete. Because when you have Miles Boykin and Chase Claypool and Javon McKinley and Ben Skoranek, number one, we could argue about whether or not they should have always only played those guys, or they should have mixed up their personnel, whatever. And even Chris Fink was this way as well. Those guys all did their best work up to the point of the catch. That's when they did damage. So it was getting open with routes or making one-on-ones, but they weren't guys chase a little bit, but they weren't guys that were going to, take an RPO or a screen or a slant, turn it into a 70-yard play. So you had to scheme to that. And I thought Tommy did a pretty decent job of scheming to that this past year. You don't have to scheme your way into 1 million points this year because you have a lot more playmakers. So sometimes your good scheme is just get the flipping ball out on the perimeter.
Right. Sometimes it is that easy.
Throw him a bubble, throw him a look. Just throw him a speed out in space and an RPO. Like we don't have to. This isn't rocket science, right? Like let's use your talent, which you couldn't do that last year a ton. I think they still could have used more RPOs, much like we saw in 2018 with the hitches, the quick outs, and things like that, just to kind of chain moving plays. We saw Cole Kmet catch a bubble screen and on third down and run 10 yards to pick up a first down in 2018. They weren't game-changing plays, but they were plays that forced you to respect the run and get on the perimeter. Now, if you have it where you have guys that can actually, if you're a corner and you miss me, get ready to, the band director's like panicking, like, oh shoot, he's about to go 80. Everybody get ready. Let's go. Brayton Lindsay's about to ghost this. You know what I mean? And that's what was kind of fun about watching Josh Adams in 2018. It's like, or 2017. If you were the band, you had to always be ready. Like, okay, they're on offense. Is Josh Adams or Brandon Wimbush about to go 80 on this play? You had to be ready, because they can score from anywhere. Right. Whereas with this team, it's like, oh, they're at the 20. I'm going to go grab a hot dog real quick. I got some time. You know what I mean? So I'm kind of being a little hyperbolic there, but you get the point. They needed to go on a sustained drive. This offense, to me, I think has a chance to bring a little bit of both of that because you've got you've got Kyron who can also grind. You've got Michael Mayer. You've got the tight ends. You'd have a Kevin Austin. You've got Avery Davis who can also be a chain mover. Yeah, he can make plays after the catch, but is he a guy that's going to go 70 every time he touches the ball? No, he's more of a catch a ball on 3rd and 7, 3 yards short of the sticks, make a couple dudes miss, and you've picked up the first down. Right. And so they have those type of possession type of guys too, with the big play guys, and I think that's a big reason why I'm cautious. I'm sort of excited to see this offense this year. I'm nervous about whether or not they're going to open it up or not, but if they do, I'm thinking, man, this offense could be really good, and you've got really good distributors at quarterback that can add something to that as well. So it's a really good question, Trey.
D-Rock Ira says he won't be listening today, going from hot dogs yesterday to hurricane shutters today. I'm sure Brian and Vince will provide another quality show. I'll try to check back in later. Go Irish with the hurricane symbol and the Irish shamrock.
Hurricane prep is a good excuse not to be listening to the show.
Be safe.
We'll be praying for you, man. And all of you all down there that are in that
scary.
In that side, in that line of the storms.
Yeah, that's scary. Brian asks, did Vinny get his ears lowered? I did, actually, right before vacation. Had to lower him down. Notre Dame 2164. I love the banter between Vince and Brian. Glad to have Vince back. I'm glad to be back.
No one's happier than me. I do not like doing shows by myself. I don't. They're not as much fun.
RP says the amount of quality content you guys crank out is simply incredible. Thank you. And then he's got a question. Over under on Mayer. 80 catches, 1,000 yards, and 10 touchdowns.
Interesting.
Woo, 80 catches. That's a big number.
Yeah,
I'm going to go really big.
I'm going to look at something here real quick. While you answer that question first, Vince, because I'm curious about something.
I think it could be. I think it's going to be under the 80. I think he's going to be under the 1,000, but I think he could be over the 10. So I will go under, over for Michael Mayer on those 3 numbers.
I'm just trying to see if we've seen any tight ends kind of have that kind of production in recent seasons.
That's a major production.
That's a ton
on the first 2 numbers. Now, granted, 10 touchdowns is a lot too, but I do feel like regardless of whether he's going to be a focal point for the defense in the red zone, there's a lot of other options that Notre Dame can go to, and I still think he's going to get his. To steal something from the kids. I think he's going to get his in the red zone. So I think he could have over the 10.
Yeah, the 10 I feel good about. The 80, I definitely say under on the 80. The 1,000 would be the one that I'm a little like, because I could see it more like Mark Andrews in 2017 had this stat line, Vince. That was the tight end in Oklahoma who's now with now was it 2018? Where was that season at? I'm trying to find that Mark Andrews year. But Mark Andrews from Oklahoma had a year somewhat recently that I think maybe could be close to it. He had 62 catches for 958 yards and 8 touchdowns. So he got close to that 1,000, but he averaged 15 and a half yards a catch. I don't know if the offense at Notre Dame is built in a way that a tight end is going to average that many yards per catch. And I definitely don't think the reason I don't think he could get to 80 is Michael Mayer capable of putting up those kind of numbers? Sure.
Absolutely.
But a tight end has to have so much volume in order to get to that point. And I don't know if there's I think defensive coordinators, in my opinion, are going to be geared towards stopping him first and foremost this year. And if they're not early, they will be soon. It won't take long for them to figure it out. But so I'm going to go under, over.
Me too.
On those.
Look at that. Great minds. Okay. AJ says it needs to be Kevin Austin, in my opinion. Brandon Plensner says, I seriously hope Jack Cohn breaks out this season. However, I'm getting a feeling Lawrence Keys is going to break out big time.
I like where his head's at. And I think based on the time, he said that before we started talking about.
Oh, he definitely said it before we started talking about Cohn and Keys for that matter.
Yeah.
Shamgel says, agree, AJ. It needs to be Kevin Austin. We need him to be one of Keys or Lindsey to break out.
Shamgel in the chat, my dude. What's going on, buddy? Appreciate you being in the chat. But I think it doesn't need to be Kevin Austin for some of the reasons we discussed, but I do think Kevin Austin breaking out is vital to this offense to have if they're going to run the offense that they've run in the past. That's the thing I would say. I think they can get away with not having Kevin Austin break out if they adjust and run more of a RPO spacing kind of offense. But if they're going to run what they've run in the past, they have to have Kevin Austin break out. Now, I will say this. If everybody plays to their full potential, Kevin Austin's their best receiver.
Mm-hmm.
So this isn't about Kevin Austin. We're not high on Kevin Austin. I think he's their most talented receiver. I just got to see it. I mean, if you think about it, Lawrence Keys has over twice as many career catches as Kevin Austin does. Braden Lindsey has
Lawrence Keys.
Braden Lindsey has over 4 times more career catches as Kevin Austin does. Kid's got 6 career catches.
Right.
I'm at the point now where I just got to see it first. Is he capable of it? Absolutely. I just got to see it.
All right, we got a lot of Kevin Austins in here. SMP 15 says Lindsey is due. He needs to be used on the jet sweep. Look, if he's healthy, he needs to be used all over the field. I mean,
he would have been used on that this year if he was healthy. Right. Braden Lindsey was literally not healthy at the start of the first of the game of the season. I don't think he played against Duke. He was already injured, and he wasn't 100% against South Florida, but it was his first game back. And if you remember, he had like 3 touches in the first quarter in that game. Tommy Reese was like, we're going to get Braden the ball.
Yeah.
And he got injured again.
Right.
So I think they would have done that, just like we saw at the end of the 2019 season. He had the reverse for a long touchdown against USC. He had a jet sweep for a 60-yard touchdown against BC. They did those type of things with him in 2019. I guarantee you Tommy Reese would have done a lot of that stuff this year. And that is something where we have to be somewhat understanding of what they did on offense this year, is they didn't have Kevin Austin and Braden Lindsey for most of the year.
Right.
From what I was told, they were preparing for those 2 guys to be focal points of the offense.
And
maybe not
changes.
The way that maybe we should have, but when those 2 got, and then they both went down, and it was just kind of like, because Kevin got hurt during the summer, Braden got hurt during fall camp, and it was just like, okay, what are we going to do now? I think they should have found other answers in other places. We've talked about that, but there is some understanding to that we didn't. We have yet to see Tommy Reese have even anything close to a full complement of weapons. I mean, he was down 2 big weapons before the season even started last year. And so that's another reason I'm kind of excited about this year. We're going to learn a lot about Tommy Reese this year, and I'm optimistic that it's going to be fun to watch.
You want to grab that super chat, Brian?
Sure.
Thank you, sir.
I think it's going to be from John A1, I think. I recognize that. John A1, my man.
Yeah.
Josh Lugg, I think he's got a chip on his shoulders. The O-line tradition is expected during his year, not on Lugg's watch. I could see Josh.
Absolutely.
So there were other guys that we discussed, but we wanted to keep it to like 3 guys each, so that way the show wasn't 2.5 hours long.
I think that's a
again,
great one. I think Josh Lugg is a great one.
I could see it. And if you look at the way he played in 2019 in those last 5 games, he played good football. He did.
I think
he needed to,
because
losing Hainsey was huge.
Yeah.
Huge.
Coleman Smith says they just need to get the ball in Tyree's hands. I really don't care how. Agreed. Not going to get an argument from me on that one.
I mean, I'm kind of a nerd, so I somewhat care how. I think there's ways that better fit his schedule. But to the point that Coleman's making, 100% agree.
Yes.
100% agree.
Matty K55 says, yeah, you guys hit it right on the nose. I thought Tyree should have been used 110% more in the ACC championship game and the playoff game as well.
Which is kind of sad because that would have got him to what? 2 touches? I'm just
math.
Trying to do the math here.
But
the point he's making is absolutely correct. I mean, you've got a weapon like that. To not game plan to use him just makes it makes no sense. And I'm sorry. Yeah, he had one run against Clemson. He had a kid that runs a 4.3 who had been productive.
Right.
Was coming off the last game he played in. He had a 90-plus yard touchdown, and he had 1 carry, and it came in the 4th quarter with the game over, basically, and he went 21 yards for a touchdown.
Mm-hmm. Makes perfect sense to me. Thomas Walsh says Lindsey will stay healthy, thinking 8 touchdowns, 650 yards receiving, and 18 yards per catch.
That'd be huge.
That would be a great year.
Put him at what, like 35 or so catches, right? 18 yards. I'm trying to do the math here in my head. I hope that I'm somewhat on. Let me see here. 18. Yeah, a little over 18, a little over 35 to 38 catches, 650 yards. I could see that. I could definitely see that. I don't know about the 8 TDs thing, but I'd love to see it.
It depends on how many he breaks on his own.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like it would be.
I'd probably think with that number of touches, I'd say probably closer to like 5.
Yeah.
5 or 6 would be the most.
Sure.
But, then you get him up another 10 touches and he gets into like 40, 45, and then all of a sudden you get to that. But, I mean, to Thomas's point, though, I mean, that would be very impactful because his numbers would not be the only impact of his play. That's the thing we have to understand is his style of play, even if he does that, Thomas, it's like Rocket. When you actually go back and look at Rocket, and I'm not saying he's as good as Rocket. I'm simply making a point that we can all relate to. If you look at Rocket's numbers, they weren't exactly on offense really knock you or blow you away numbers, right? And part of it was the era and the offense, but it was like his impact because you had to game plan for that speed.
Sure.
Impacted so many other things. So he can impact the game even though he had 2 touches. And Braden Lindsey can be a similar type of player in this offense in that, again, not saying he's Rocket, but because he is a home run threat, that if he is stepping up and making plays early, you have to game plan for him. And that's when all of a sudden Michael Mayer starts being a bigger impact. And then you got Kyron Williams. And again, that's why I'm so excited about this team, because if you have to defend this guy, then you've got this guy, this guy, and this guy. But if you try to defend that guy, you've got this guy, this guy, and this guy. And that's what makes me more excited about this offense than I think a lot of people nationally are, is that there's a lot more weapons here than people realize. If they can stay healthy and be utilized correctly, and I'm confident in the latter. I think they will be utilized correctly. And if I'm wrong, I'm going to be very disappointed. But I really do think Tom Reese is going to use those weapons. It's more about can they stay healthy? I think right now that's my bigger concern. And can the line play to its potential? The line playing to its potential is like, okay, now you're going to the playoff and doing damage. You're still going to beat most of the teams on your schedule, even if the line's just okay. Because you did that in 2019 with a pretty subpar offensive line. I mean, the offensive line in 2019 was not good. It was not good. And they went 11-2. Right? So, yeah, that's why I'm excited about this year. I really am.
Kevin Carter says, Brian and Vince love the show and the insane in-depth coverage. I'm going with a dark horse guy that should have a chip on his shoulder to prove himself in Kevin Austin. I don't even know if I would say dark horse, but I mean, I would love it. If he's healthy, I'm sure he will have a chip on his shoulder. There's no question about it.
And I think if Kevin, to take it to what we were talking about earlier from a national perception, I do think Kevin Austin would qualify as a dark horse when you consider the national perception. This kid has 6 career catches in 3 years.
Nobody knows who he is.
Right.
Outside of
we
this
do.
Community.
Right. We do. Right.
Community,
you all do. But like outside of the Notre Dame community, I don't think anyone's talking about, hey, watch out for that Kevin Austin guy, because you haven't seen him do it. I mean, you haven't seen him do it.
Omar Alston says the breakout will be from the wide receiving core. Someone outside of Mayer and Davis will have a big jump in catches from previous seasons. Richard Robinson, hope you guys enjoyed your fourth. I have to go with Lawrence Keys. He looked explosive in practice. Definitely a game-changing wide receiver if he can stay healthy.
And again, the thing I like about Lawrence is we've seen him make plays in big games. That's the other thing. It's like that's what gives me a little bit more comfort picking him than maybe Kevin Austin, because we've actually seen Lawrence under those bright lights at Georgia stepping up and making plays. It should have got the ball more. I mean, he was open a few more times.
Oh, yeah. Brent Byer says Keys has looked great. I think the wide receivers will be much better than most anticipate. A lot of depth and talent there, just not so much proven talent.
Right.
Like, that's a perfect example.
Proven from the standpoint of, like, can they be go-to guys? But, like, Braden Lindsey's made a lot of plays. Lawrence Keys has made some plays. Avery Davis, I believe, has over 30 career catches. So there's been guys that have played. But to his point, have any of them played to the level where they can be the guy? That's what we haven't seen yet.
Kevin says so many options that regardless who it is, if Reese opens it up as we expect, it's going to be fun to watch. And that's
absolutely
the thing. And when you get more of these guys involved, that is when offense is fun to watch. Because when you don't know who it's going to go to, you know what I mean? Like you could predict where the ball was going to go at times with Notre Dame. I mean, let's just be honest. You just could. And when you just don't know, and you don't know who's going to make that big play, and you don't know if somebody's just going to pop off an 80-yarder.
You may not even know who's going to be on the field.
That's
on
fun,
any given
man.
Play. That's the other part. Yeah,
so much fun. Yeah, I agree. Notre Dame 21-64. A little off topic, but do you guys think Notre Dame? Let me back up. Little off topic, but do you guys think Notre Dame made a late search with Singleton and could pull off one this afternoon?
No, and just to remind people, Nicholas Singleton is going to be making his commitment today at some point in time. I do not expect it to be Notre Dame.
Fair enough.
But if Notre Dame is smart, they will not stop recruiting him.
Yeah, and I'd go right down to the end, and I wouldn't stop after he made his choice.
Nicholas really likes Notre Dame.
Yeah.
I think if there was like absolutely zero external pressure at all from any way, shape, form, or fashion, I think Notre Dame would be in a much better place with him. I'm sorry, he's tomorrow. He's Tuesday.
And that's what some of the guys are saying.
Decision tomorrow.
He is making it tomorrow.
Yeah, the 6th.
Mark Stallman, freshman breakout player not named Blake Fisher. Well, guess what? We're going to have a show about that.
Mark's trying to get ahead of us here a little bit.
Yes, he is.
That's a great question. And Mark, I don't know if we've seen you posting here for, so I appreciate it very, very much.
Yes.
But I very definitely appreciate being in the show, and I love the question. I'm going to give you, because I don't want to completely ignore him, I want to give him a little bit of a teaser.
You're going to taste? Give him a taste.
I'm going to give him a little bit of a teaser as far as freshman breakout. But I don't know if it say a breakout, but I could see a particular player from Georgia coming in, and if some things fall his way, could be a much bigger impact part of this offense than we think. Maybe a taller guy, probably catches passes. So that's what I'm going to go with. Okay, it's a little taste.
Now you're making me have to go look up the roster, see where these guys
are. All the recruitniks know who I'm talking about.
Yeah, I know. Brent Byers.
I want to go back up to Trey's question, because Trey kind of refined his previous question about, how guys can make plays with the ball. So now he's taking it to a different level, and this is a little bit more of a narrower response.
Yeah, he says who can create instant offense, take a 5-yard curl 50 yards with more of an expanded role. I believe Tyree, Keys, and Lindsey are key and can score anywhere on the field.
I would add Xavier Watson and Lorenzo Styles to that conversation. I think they have a legit 5 players. And I don't put Kyron Williams in that way, because we've seen kind of Kyron Williams last year. He's got a ton of talent, but he can get caught, right? I mean, we saw it against Duke. We've seen it before. I think Florida State was another one he got caught. But still, he can be 4. He can take a 5-yarder and go 40, 50, but he may get caught before he gets to the end zone. But so you could add Kyron into that as well, I think. But then I would definitely add Watson and Lorenzo Styles. I mean, again, that's 6 guys that I think have the physical tools to take a short play, whether it's a swing pass, a quick hitch, a quick out, a slant, a glance, whatever you want to call it, and go the distance, you've got to be able to utilize that. I mean, there's you only need really 3 of them. I mean, half of them step up this year, you're going to be in pretty good shape.
Brent says, I think Buckner could still put up the kind of breakout year, but in a different role, not necessarily starting. I mean, if we see the proliferation that he's capable of, I would consider that a mini breakout. I love where his head is on this one.
Yeah.
Because if he is in
that one, I agree with a lot more, Vince, than he should start, for sure.
So like a la, you mentioned Tim Tebow earlier when he was a freshman, right? So you create a package for Tyler Buckner like Urban Meyer did for Tim Tebow as a freshman. Yes, I would consider that a mini breakout. Absolutely.
Yep.
Trey Taylor coming at me. No, I'm just kidding. Vince, I like Avery, but I still think he's limited. For him to have a breakout, he, for me, would need to come close to the impact in a slot like a Daz Newsome or Amari Rodgers.
Daz Newsome from North Carolina, Amari. Obviously, Notre Dame fans know who Amari Rodgers is from Clemson.
Yes, they do.
But Daz Newsome was North Carolina's number 2 receiver last year. But to his point, though, Trey, Daz had 54 catches for 684 yards and 6 touchdowns last year. I could definitely see Avery doing that. What I don't see Avery doing is what Daz did the year before. I think he had looking at now 72 catches for 1,000 yards the year before, for 10 touchdowns. I don't see Avery doing that, but I could definitely see him doing what Daz did in 2020, which is 50 catches, 600 plus yards, 17. See here, he had some return stuff. He won't be doing that, but yeah, he had a total of 56 touches for a little over 700 yards, rushing and receiving. I could see Avery doing that. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
I can absolutely see him doing that.
We got a couple of freshman predictions here. Brent says, I think Colsey has a real shot with Austin's injury history. If Austin goes down, Colsey is essentially the next man up, or should be. He's a really talented dude, insane speed for a guy that size. Matt D says, I want to see some fall video from practice, but I have a feeling that we could be surprised by Lorenzo Styles. He could be that freshman that gets on the field.
Dude's getting ahead of us a little bit. We're getting ahead of our newcomer show we're going to be doing.
I know, right? I know.
I promise we'll be talking about newcomers next week. We already have that on the schedule. That was our next topic.
Kai S. Can someone explain to me why so many are continuing to state that Tyler will start next year over Drew?
Yeah, it's a simple, higher ranked recruit.
Yeah, that's why.
And a more dynamic athlete. I think those are the two things that factor into it. And I think that because Drew Pine looks a lot like Ian Book, there's a lot of people that say, well, I don't want that again. I understand that. That's part of it too. That's things that I've been told people, he's too much like Ian Book. Oh, no, he's not. Just the only thing him and Ian Book to me have in common is their height. That's it. They play different games. Drew's not going to run like Ian. There's things I think Drew's going to do better than Ian. I think that's really part of it. And part of it too, Kai, is not a disrespect to Drew. I think it's just an excitement about what Tyler Buckner can be.
Mm-hmm.
Because people look, first round draft picks are winning championships, right? And people look at Tyler Buckner and say, of all the quarterbacks on the roster, that's the guy that has a chance to be a first round draft pick. And there's excitement over it. And I get it. I understand it. I think Drew Pine's going to be a little harder to beat out than some people think. And I think Kai looks like Kai feels the same way.
Liam Burke says, who do you think will wear the C on their jerseys this year?
I think Jarrett Patterson's an easy one.
Number one.
Yeah, I think I'd be shocked if Kyron Williams isn't a captain. He'd be another one I could see. I could see Josh Lugg potentially being an offensive captain. Defensively, I think we'll see Myron potentially be one of those guys. Myron or Kurt, one of those two guys. I think one of those two veteran defensive linemen will be a captain. I think we'll see Drew White, whether he starts or not, and he'll be a captain. And I think Kyle Hamilton will be a captain.
Kyle Hamilton would
be I think sometimes those talented guys get the C on their chest because they're just real talented and you want to give them love. I think Kyle has from what I've been told, has earned because Notre Dame doesn't give usually the captaincies are for fourth-year players, but there have been some guys that have earned junior captaincies. Robert Hainsey obviously was one, like true juniors. It doesn't happen often. Like Mike McGlinchey was a 2-time captain, but that was as a senior and a fifth-year senior. But I think Kyle has, from what I've been told about what he did in the spring and then what he's doing this offseason, will have earned that true junior captaincy. And not just because he's a good football player, but from a leadership standpoint.
Paul Gonzalez Jr., and we kind of discussed this earlier when we were talking about Jack Cohn, but he says, but do you believe Jack Cohn could be a Heisman Trophy candidate in this offense with all of these weapons? Absolutely.
Yeah.
And your reasoning was, I think, spot on, that if Ian Book can come in 8th in the Heisman Trophy voting with the numbers that he put up, and I'm just talking numbers on paper, 15 touchdowns, and I mean, he had pedestrian numbers for a quarterback.
Yeah, for a Heisman candidate.
For a Heisman, yes. But if he can come in 8th, he's technically a candidate.
Right. He had 15 touchdown passes, right? He had 2,800 passing yards in 12 games. He had 400 some rushing yards. And even if you add the 9 rushing touchdowns, he only had 24 touchdowns. That's only 2 a game.
Right.
I mean, Joe Burrow was at like 5 a game.
Right.
You know, I mean, just he wasn't anywhere close, in my opinion, to, last year Ian Book ranked 34th in passing yards last year. He ranked, I'm trying to find it here, he ranked 33rd in quarterback rating. He ranked 34th in yards per attempt last year. Those are very mediocre numbers, and he finished in the top 10 in the Heisman because it's Notre Dame. He had some big moments. The Clemson game, to me, is the reason why the drive he put together in the fourth quarter against Clemson
was big time.
That was the reason, to me, he was considered a Heisman candidate.
It was big time. That was a big time drive.
2 huge throws on that drive.
Absolutely.
Well, 3 actually. If I go back, 3 big drives, but or throws on that drive. So I mean, but again, it's your Notre Dame, right? I mean that matters. People can say all they want, and I kind of look forward to Jack Cohn being like a top 5 guy, because then I get to listen to all. I love it when fans that aren't Notre Dame fans lose their minds because they think Notre Dame's getting favoritism for bringing Notre Dame. That's one of my favorite things. Like that's, that popcorn moment, like, ooh, Jack Cohn's a Heisman candidate. He's going to New York. Oh, I can't wait to watch Twitter the next 2 days as these college football fans lose their minds, about that. But I mean, that's one of the benefits of being at Notre Dame.
Right. Spartan B88, excuse me. Got to put my reading spectacles on. Can we bring back throwing bombs down the field a la Quinn and Samardzija? Ian Book was like an old woman driving on the interstate when it came to throwing the ball down the field.
I don't get that one, because my grandmother, we had to kind of tell her to calm down when she got old. She had a lead foot. But,
I talked about one of the reasons that I picked Jack Cohn to be one of my breakouts this year is I do think he will have that trigger to go downfield, and we've seen it in his Wisconsin film.
Yeah.
So I do think he will go downfield. Now, is that going to be part of the offense? Is that, there's a lot of question marks.
I think it will be,
but
that's just not something Ian Book was necessarily super comfortable in. He did it a lot in 2018.
Right.
But even in 2019, as good as Chase Claypool was, he was reluctant to do that at times. I mean, it wasn't until the fourth quarter against Georgia that he took that shot to Claypool, despite the fact Georgia was down both of their starting corners by the first quarter. So the only thing I'd say about that is that's another reason why it's important that Kevin Austin step up, because you're not going to be throwing a lot of back shoulder fades to Braden Lindsey and Lawrence Keys and Avery Davis and those kind of guys. That's why you need Kevin Austin. And that's also, and we're going to talk about this in a future show, but that's also why we could see a really interesting usage of Michael Mayer this year, because he could be one of those guys.
Matt D says, I could see Cohn getting upwards of 2,800 to 3,000 yards if our wide receivers stay healthy and the O-line meshes.
Let me say that about those numbers. If he starts the entire year and he only throws for 2,800 to 3,000 yards, no. That means Notre Dame is scoring like 48 points a game and they're blowing people out.
Because he's out.
Because he's out.
He's out. Yeah.
Look, I mean, even in 2019, even Ian Book this year in 12 games threw for 2,800 yards. I mean, I would be really disappointed if he only threw for 2,800 yards. I mean, Ian Book in 2019 passed for 3,400 yards, or over 3,000 yards in 2019. And that was, I mean, again, a guy that was just not. I think this offense could be a little closer to what it was, and I'm just talking regular season now. I think this offense is going to be a little bit closer to what it looked like in 2018 when Ian Book replaced Jack Cohn.
Right.
Where you had the RPOs and Ian was completing like 70% of his passes, and you were getting the ball in space and you're doing all this because they didn't have a great O-line that year. They had lost a bunch of guys. They were doing a lot more RPOs, a lot more perimeter passes, a lot more one-on-ones outside, really taking advantage of their size outside, really spreading the field out a lot, right? And that was effective. And then you were hitting Dexter with the inside stuff right up the middle. I think we'll see something that looks more like that than what we saw in 2020. And that because Ian Book that year was on pace. I mean, he ended up averaging, I think it was like 290.6 yards per game in his starts, but he only started like 9 games that year. right, because of some injuries. If you expand that out over the course of 13 games, he throws for over 3,700 yards that year. I don't know if Jack Cohn will throw for that many, but I could see it being 33 to 3,500. If he only throws 28 to 3,000, either A, he got hurt and missed a game or two, or B, the offense is going to stink because they're just trying to run it all the time, or C, which could mean this, they're just killing people. And so he's only throwing for like 230 a game because he plays like
he has to go sit down.
4 quarters the whole year.
Yeah, right.
So I guess I can live with that.
Jason Benanti says, longtime listener, love the show. I would love to see Cohn and Buckner have a Leak/Tebow combination this year. And we've talked about that. We both feel like Buckner needs to have some sort of a part of the offense. And I would love that as well.
What did Florida do that year? What
won a national championship.
That's right. That's
Is that what you're getting at?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey, it can work.
Amazing, isn't it?
Yeah. Again, I'm not saying Tyler Buckner's Tim Tebow. They're different types of runners. I mean, Tim Tebow is like 230 pounds. You basically use him as a fullback, but you get the point.
But the point, right. That little jump pass was like his best throw.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see here. And this was a kind of a culmination of a conversation going about how the backup quarterbacks at Notre Dame need to have quality playing time. He says that's the issue. They can't just play mop-up duty. They have to have meaningful minutes. You don't beat Ohio State off of mop-up duty. Right. I agree completely. Right.
We even saw that with Trevor Lawrence. Remember, Trevor Lawrence didn't start the season as a starting quarterback in 2018. They brought him in and rotated him in. Kelly Bryant, who led him to the playoff the year before, was their starting quarterback up until the Syracuse game. And that's one of the things I love about this chat, Vince, is they're having their own little conversation.
I know. It's fantastic.
Awesome. And it's respectful. I mean, from what I can see, it's respectful. It's a good back and forth. It's what I want to see. Here's Wade Garrett says, OSU is my least favorite team in all sports, more than Michigan, more than the Broncos.
Oh,
Wade,
wow.
I was feeling you to a degree until that last comment, and then you just broke my heart. You just, I don't want to say you're dead to me, but you're on the cusp. You're on the cusp, my friend. Hurt my heart.
I'll throw this one out there because I know you love answering it. Antoine Porsche Rideau says, "Do you see a quiet week with commitments this week?"
Quiet week in regards to will there be 3 or 4? Yeah, it'll be quiet. Will it be silent that none happen? I don't think so. I think we'll have at least one additional show this week. That's almost it.
And Matt responds to him saying, haha, trying to get him to slip.
And I did kind of say it earlier. I mean, he asked that question before I said it,
Yeah.
But I did answer that one. But Antoine asked the question before I said it during the show, so I wanted to address it again. Nolan has here we go. Notre Dame 2164. I don't know if this is a good thing for you, my friend, because
I know.
Finally watching you guys on my TV instead of my big phone. See, at least I try to stay back where Vince is like, all up in your face.
You got an awesome setup, man. I've got a laptop.
I'm hoping it's going to be better by the end of the week. We'll see, but I appreciate you being a part of it. And we're glad you're back home from Florida, and back safe and sound and ready to be with us. Nolan Esparza has a good one. A lot of us have heard about Kevin Austin for years, but haven't seen what makes him special. What have you guys seen in practice that makes him so special? Who does his skill set compare to? Well, we have seen a little bit of Kevin Austin games. I mean, he had the big play against Navy where he caught a crossing route. This isn't regular. I mean, this is early in the game. Caught a crossing route and did something with it. He had a nice back shoulder catch against Wake Forest and mop-up duty. But what we've seen from him in practices, because that's really where a lot of your and I opinion is coming from, is he's been unguardable in practice. I mean, even when he's covered, he's not covered. And we saw the last spring that Phil Jurkovec was here. We saw him and Phil Jurkovec just abuse the second team defense like on the regular. And what it would be is there'd be times when he'd be covered and Phil would just throw a bomb and just Kevin would just go make a great play on it. Mm-hmm. And you couldn't cover him. I mean, there was the one time we saw in the stadium as a true freshman, his first fall camp, where Dante Vaughn's got him covered perfectly. And Ian Book throws it high into the outside, and Kevin Austin just does like this spin where it's like, I don't even know how he had the body control to do it. And he just out jumps Dante Vaughn, who's like 6'3" and currently in the NFL,
right,
playing for the Chargers. And he did stuff like that regularly. and he's got speed to stretch the field. He can make plays after the catch in space. Like, he can catch a crossing route and outrun you. He's not a guy that's going to catch a pass, make people miss, and then go run. But like what we saw in Navy, you get him a crossing route. If he catches a 10-yard in cut with a couple steps on you, he can split the defense and take it. He's got that kind of speed. He doesn't have necessarily like Braden Lindsey stretch the defense all the time speed, but he's got enough speed with his size. But those are the things we see, Nolan. It's a very good question because you haven't seen it a whole lot, but we've seen those things in practice where it's just like, goodness gracious, this kid is good and just scary good. And and that's kind of part of the reason I was so excited to see what the future could hold with Phil Dracovic, because some of the stuff we saw from him and Kevin Austin in practice was just ridiculous.
And seeing that potentially translate onto the field was just like,
you remember that one practice we were at was like 4 out of 5 throws Phil Dracovic made were like bombs to Kevin Austin that were all complete.
Right.
And then he tried to force one because, young guys, he tried to force one and it got picked off. But like, they were just smoking the backup, the second team defense. And it was fun to watch because you're seeing 2 high level athletes just say, okay, you know what we're running, you know what the play is. I don't care. We're still going to go make plays on you, and it was fun to watch. It's a very good question, Nolan.
John A1 says, my hope is Keys and Watts break out this year. I've been rooting for Keys for years and couldn't understand why he wasn't targeted more. I also hope to see Watts in rotation with Joe Wilkins.
I hope Xavier Watts gets playing time this year. I would love for him to be the breakout guy because, again, the thing I like about Xavier is he brings he can do some of the things Lawrence Keys and Braden Lindsey and Avery Davis can do, but he brings it in a bigger package. I think he's got a bigger body. I think he can do a lot of those things. But also, we know he's going to be here after this year. We don't know that any of those other guys are going to be on the team in 2022. Xavier Watts, obviously, assuming he gets a role this year, isn't going anywhere. He loves Notre Dame. Now, if they sit him on the bench again this year, could he maybe consider leaving? Sure. But as long as he's part of the rotation, he loves it in Notre Dame. This reason he picked Notre Dame was because of Notre Dame, not just football. And so they got to get him going this year, even if it's just 15 or so catches and just get some taste and all that kind of stuff. And then he can have his breakout in 2022, but he's got to be a part of what they're doing this year, John.
I don't even know if I can attempt this particular name. Glenn Butte God, maybe. I'm not sure. I apologize if I butchered it, my friend. He says, is Watts the last receiver left from the 2020 class?
Yep.
That's what I thought.
The other two were Jordan Johnson and Jay Brunel. They obviously both transferred this offseason. So they have, from the 2019 and 2020 recruiting classes, they have 1 receiver left on the roster. Now, Cam Hart's still on the team, but he's now a DB.
Right. The Fifth Horseman. Great name, by the way. If Notre Dame has another offensive showing similar to what they produced last year, how do you think Kelly will handle it in the offseason? Reese out, someone else in? Question.
I don't think he'll do anything because if they have a similar offensive performance, it's because that's what Brian Kelly wants. I don't know this for a fact, but I've talked to enough people that makes me think that if Tommy Rees runs the offense the way that Tommy Rees wants to run the offense, they're gonna see at least a 4 or 5 point increase in points this year, at least, even with an offensive line that's not necessarily elite. Now, there's some things he's got to do better. He's got to simplify some things. That's going to be part of that too. But it's Brian Kelly that would be the reason they have another grind it out. Tommy Rees doesn't want to be a ground and pound coach. I don't believe.
Antoine Porsche Rideau says, with the way DeVaris Daniels has played in the CFL, do you think if he would have been drafted in the NFL, if he wasn't suspended and was able to continue to improve like he did from 2012 to 2013?
I do, because I think not getting suspended would have meant DeVaris was a more mature person overall. That's what has hurt him. It's not like it's not like Javon McKinley's situation, right? Where Javon had that one bad moment and got in trouble, but it was the exact opposite of what he'd always been, right? So you kind of give him the benefit of the doubt because you can chalk it up to, none of us want to be defined by what we do in our worst moments, I don't think. But with Javon, that worst moment didn't define his 5 years in Notre Dame. He remember, good kid, great, great student, all this, no problems. He had that one bad night. DeVaris was a different deal. DeVaris was just always something with him. And so I think that hurt him and the suspension was just a culmination of that. And so that's what I think hurt him. But if he wasn't that talent-wise, just physical talent-wise, could DeVaris have been an NFL player? Absolutely. Would he been a great NFL player? Probably not. I don't think he's fast enough to be a great NFL player. But DeVaris late in 2020, you watch him against Bama. That dude belonged on that field. He's a good football player.
Liam O'Malley joined the show late, so I didn't see your breakout players. But to me, if Braden Lindsey has a breakout year, I think he could affect the offense more than any other receiver.
That we did not pick him as a breakout, Liam, but we both agree with your assessment on that completely. Breakout meaning like a big jump in production. He could impact this. I think him and Kevin Austin, to me, the two receivers we did not pick, are guys that if they break out, they'd have an even greater impact on the offense than the guys we actually picked. Lawrence would be close. He'd be close.
Tommy Lawson, and I don't know the answer to this. Has Notre Dame ever had two wide receivers with over 1,000 yards in 1 year?
Yeah, Samarjan Stovall did it in 2005. Now, they would have had a couple more years that way. 2009, Michael Floyd and Golden Tate were on pace for it. Michael had 795 yards in only 7 games. He was on pace for over 1,100 yards. Golden Tate, they both averaged over 110 yards per game receiving in 2009. But obviously, Michael Floyd, if you remember, got hurt against Michigan State. And the same thing would have happened, I believe, in 2008. Golden went over 1,000. I think Michael probably would have gone over 1,000 if he was healthy too. But, yeah, they've done it. And, of course, they were all during the Charlie era where they threw it a lot more. But, yeah, they've done that. I think that was the first time. I think that was the first time in 2005, or the only time, but it's been done before.
Ron wants to know, hey, Coach, did you get the package?
I did not.
Right.
I'll go check the mail when we're done. We have not got it yet, Ron. See, Jermaine's got some where you? You're a little bit below.
I'm a little bit below you.
Yeah, Jermaine Berkeley, 3 spots up, Vince, has got got a good one.
Goes, my breakouts are Tosh Baker.
He's challenging. That's what I like about this one. He's like, okay, challenging.
I didn't see the end there.
Yeah.
My breakouts are Tosh Baker, Blake Fisher, and Deion Colsey. Change my mind.
So I'm not going to try to change your mind on the last two. I'm just going to say we're going to talk about them on our next week. Our Monday, Tuesday topic next week are going to be about newcomers.
Yes.
So we're going to talk about them there. We purposely didn't have any freshmen in our breakout conversation today because we're going to get to that next week. Tosh Baker, I hope you're right on that one. The reason I say that you're change your mind is I still think he's a year away from a strength, conditioning, and technique standpoint. I think with Blake Fisher being the breakout, that takes out one tackle spot. And I think Josh Lugg's a pretty good football player. He's going to have the other one. They're not going to bench Josh Lugg for Tosh Baker unless if Tosh breaks out this year, it's because there was an injury, in my opinion. Now, when we have this conversation a year from now, Jermaine, then I have a feeling that Vince and I probably are going to both be with you on that first one.
Brent says, let me pose this differently to you. Do you think we have a better shot at being elite and winning against Ohio State and Clemson and ultimately the college football playoff in 2022 if we start Buckner this year instead of Cohn?
No, because I think that could potentially hurt your development of the rest of your team. It may be better for Tyler Buckner, but it doesn't necessarily help the rest of your team. Right. So, no, I don't. But again, I don't think that should matter because I think Notre Dame has a chance to win a national championship this year. And this year, they don't play Ohio State and Clemson. So your focus should be on winning it this year. Now, are there always does Brian Kelly need to do a better job of making sure he's developing players for the future? Yes, that's something he's not been good enough with on offense. Defense has gotten a lot better at it the last few years. And I think it's going to take another jump this year. But offensively, that's been a problem. But again, when you're where you are as Notre Dame, you're a top 10 caliber team. You got to put the team that gives you the best chance to win all your games this year and compete for title this year. And if Jack Cohn's the quarterback I think he is, he's that guy. Now, if Tyler Buckner beats him out, I'm starting Tyler Buckner. So this isn't a no way, shape, form, or fashion am I playing Tyler Buckner. It's just that Tyler Buckner's got to beat Jack Cohn out. You don't play him because of what you think he could be in the future. Right. You play him because he is your best quarterback right now. And I don't think he is their best quarterback right now. I do think, however, but where Brent's at, Vince, you tell me if you agree with this, that to me is why I want Tyler Buckner to have a role this year.
Correct.
Not the starter, but have a role this year. That gives him that opportunity. Then with the spring, with some mop-up duty plus the spring, along with that role going into fall camp. I mean, that's going to be almost 40 practices he would have as the guy, assuming he wins the battle. So, but at the end of the day, Brent, I don't think that necessarily makes them better next year against Ohio State. And honestly, my opinion isn't getting ready to beat Ohio State. Yes, I want to beat Ohio State for a million reasons, but Ohio State doesn't define your season, right? It's about getting yourself ready to then, as you kind of get into your season, what allows you to be the best team you can be once you get to the middle end of the season. Because if you lose that Ohio State game, I mean, I don't think they play Clemson until like October. I'm gonna pull up the 2022 schedule. They got some time before they've got to play Clemson, and so to me, that's more of where I'm at with that. Yeah, they play Clemson November 5th.
Okay,
and then after the Ohio State game, they have home games against Marshall and Cal. Then they're at Stanford. So they're going to have games to kind of get him up to speed. I don't think you need to put all your chips in the table for that one Ohio State game. So that way you're changing who your starting quarterback is going to be in 2021. I don't think that game is going to matter. We've seen team after team after team lose in September and still make the college football playoff. Notre Dame would have made the college football playoffs twice with early season losses had they done better in November. Notre Dame lost to Georgia the second game of the year. If Notre Dame beats Miami and beats Stanford in 2017, they're in the college football playoff despite a home loss to Georgia, right? It'll be the same way at Ohio State. If they go out and handle their business as the season goes on, and between them they play Marshall, Cal, North Carolina, who will have probably lost Sam Howell, Stanford at home, UNLV, and probably have a game against Boston College or Syracuse. Because looking at those are TBAs to be announced. Looking at the open dates, it'll either fall between one of them will fall between North Carolina and Stanford, and one of them will fall between Navy and USC at the end of the year. So, I mean, that's a manageable schedule. Get to Ohio State, and then you've got plenty of time to build your team up before the Clemson game. You don't need to start worrying about that in 2021, in my opinion. 2021 is about winning a championship in 2021. You deal with 2022 when you get to 2022.
Kevin Carter says, I live in Columbus and drive Uber, picking up kids on campus on game day and still sport my Irish gear every time I'm driving on campus. Next step is getting my IB game wear for the rides.
That's gutsy.
That is, I love it.
That's a dude with some yes. I can't say it. I'm not sure if YouTube will demonetize me or give us a strike. But that takes some
brass ones.
Yes.
There you go.
Yes.
Emma is high on Kane Madden, says Kane Madden will be the offensive breakout player.
But he's already an All-American, right?
Right. Can you break out from being an All-American?
Yeah, he's already a second-team All-American. So I think what you're saying is
preseason first team, wasn't he?
He's Pro Football Focus, yeah.
Well, from what
Bill Steele had him second team. I mean, everyone's having him as first or second team guy. So the only way he could break out from that is if he's Quentin Nelson. And he's not going to be Quentin Nelson. Even if he's as good as everyone thinks he's going to be, he ain't going to be Quentin Nelson.
He's not Quentin Nelson. Quentin Nelson is the Trevor Lawrence.
He was a generational player.
Yeah, he's the Trevor Lawrence of guards. I mean, just let's be honest.
Maybe even better.
Notre Dame 2164. Do you guys think Buckner is talented enough to negate the, quote, QB regression that seems to happen to Notre Dame quarterbacks the longer they are in the system?
I don't think anybody is, because it's not a talent thing. It's a mindset thing. It's a system thing. It's things that are completely out of their control.
Jason Rose, which position group still gives you the most pause? Offensive line for me.
Offensive line for me on offensive, corner for me on defense.
Fair enough.
Christian, yeah.
Yeah, Christian Lentz baseball. Okay, I'm on board. Trevor Lawrence did not start the first 3 games of his freshman year, but his elite caliber as a player, and he was a starter in Game 4, replacing a very good returning starter.
Agree to disagree that Kelly Bryant was very good. I think Kelly Bryant was average and played on a great team. But again, Trevor Lawrence is a unicorn. That's not the standard that you then hold every other freshman quarterback to. I mean, I could give you a long list of quarterbacks that didn't play as a freshman or struggled as a freshman. And that's why I say, this guy did something, so why can't everybody? Well, that guy's the only guy to ever do that, which is what makes him who he is. I mean, it's like, if a guard comes out this year and he doesn't play like Quentin Nelson, I'm going to be like, well, that guy sucked. He didn't play like Quentin Nelson. I mean, I'm not asking anybody to do that.
So he's saying his point is that if Tyler Buchner is given the opportunity, he should do the same thing as the starting quarterback before the season ends.
He's not Trevor Lawrence.
Right.
And Trevor Lawrence, again, we can't just gloss this over. Trevor Lawrence, I believe, was a starting high school quarterback for 4 years, at the very least 3 straight years. Tyler Buchner was a varsity starting quarterback for 1 year. And it was a junior year. He missed his sophomore year with an injury. He missed his senior year because of the COVID stuff out there. Played 1 year of varsity football in the last 3 years. It's a different situation. And again, Trevor Lawrence is a unicorn.
Correct.
There were 5 first-round draft picks at quarterback this year? I believe, correct?
I think so, yeah. And they were all
Trevor, Zach Wilson, Trey Lance, Mac Jones, and Justin Fields. You know how many of those guys started as freshmen? 1. That's it. 1. That's the anomaly. Mm-hmm. He's rare. Jameis Winston didn't start as a freshman. Michael Vick didn't start as a freshman. He didn't play as a freshman. I mean, we could go to Kyler Murray did play as a freshman, and his team wasn't very good, right? Kyler Murray's pretty flipping good. I think Kyler Murray would be a very good comparison for Tyler Buchner, right? And then he ended up transferring. So he's the exception to the rule. He's not the rule.
Patrick Bird, breakout players on offense. Tyree involved in all aspects, rushing, receiving, and returning. Cohn, experience, more weapons. Keys becomes a go-to guy at wide receiver.
I dig it.
Yeah, I dig it too.
Right, and to this comment here, Searcher Green says, I love Buchner, but he's not Trevor Lawrence. Correct. There is no Trevor Lawrence in college football right now.
Right, exactly.
There isn't that guy. And that's the thing is yes. I mean, I think Searcher Green said it exactly. He's not Trevor Lawrence. Neither is anyone else. And that's the point.
Matt D jumping in. I think this has to do with the Michael Mayer over-unders. Mm-hmm. He says, I don't think we've had a wide receiver make 80 catches in the last few years.
Yeah, I think the last guy to make that many catches was actually Michael Floyd. Because Will Fuller had 76 in 2014. And then TJ Jones had 70. Yeah, Michael Floyd had 100. And then the year before, so they've had one season where a guy's had over 80 or more catches at Notre Dame, and that was Michael Floyd. He had caught 100, a school record 100.
That's right.
That year. Now, again, the other part of that too is the game has changed. You know, if Notre Dame is doing more RPOs and more quick game, there's going to be more balls to distribute, right? So that could up his catches a little bit, but 80 would be a lot. That'd be a whole lot.
You want to grab that super chat?
Leland Hartley, appreciate the super chat.
Yeah.
Very, very, very much.
First time commenter.
Yes. And from Alaska. That's awesome.
Yeah, he's the first time commenter. Love the content you guys put out. I live in Alaska, so it's been awesome to find some amazing Notre Dame content.
We
Glad we could help you out, man.
Leland.
You know, this is so off topic, but I saw a video the other day of, there's a period in Alaska where it's daylight for like, a day and a half or something like that. And they play a baseball tournament the entire time.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah. And so they got like games starting at like midnight, 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the morning.
I would never sleep if that happened to me because I can't sleep if it's light. I just can't.
I would love to like take a team up to Alaska and play in that tournament. Yeah. I think that would be just a blast. But anyway,
I'd want to have an AAU basketball tournament during that time too, man.
Right?
You know what I mean? Like
Absolutely.
Play inside, play out. I don't know. Maybe it's cold during that time of the year, but that'd be a lot of fun.
I
mean, if it's warm enough to play baseball, you could probably play basketball, right?
You'd think. Tom McCartney says Cohn and Davis connection is going to be strong, the norm for when we need a big first down. Yeah. I think that's where Avery Davis is really going to be key.
Yeah, because I think on third, to Tom's point, that's why it's a great observation, Tom.
Yeah.
Because on third down, I think the guy that teams are going to be saying we can't let that guy beat us on third down is Michael Mayer because he was really good on third down last year. I think he's going to be a focal point on third down, and I think to your point, I think that's going to make Avery Davis a really dangerous third down weapon. It's a really good observation, Tom. Very good observation.
Ashley Hill says, call me Smash. Done. If I can remember that, I will do that every time. With a decoy as tight end Michael Mayer, the advantage is going to be the health and speed of the skill positions. No question. That's always the case, I would say. Liam Gaming, is Lugg a day 3 guy in the draft?
Not right now. I think he could be. I think he could become that. I think the thing that's going to hurt Josh is he's going to have to prove they can be healthy. His back is going to have to hold up this year. But, we talked about him a little bit in our NFL draft show last week, Liam, with Ryan Roberts, and he said that Josh is the guy that Ryan has his eye on. He's got the size profile that you want. 6'7", 310 plus pounds. He's comes from Notre Dame. He'll have the experience. If he starts every game this year, he'll have over 20 career starts. I mean, he has 9 career starts under his belt already. He has almost a full season of starting experience under his belt. I think that I think when you look at it, he could be a guy that could sneak into a day 3 draft pick next year. I don't see him jumping up to day 2. I just feel like just 1 year starting would not be enough for that. Like 1 year full start would not be enough for that. And I don't know if he's got that high level talent, but yeah, definitely a day 3 guy. And if he does play well enough to break into a day 2, that means this year is going to be a lot of fun. If Josh Lugg plays like a day 2 draft pick this year, this season is going to be a lot of fun. And we may see my guy Ladarius is down there, the Bama fan. We may have another matchup. If Josh Lugg is a day 2 NFL draft pick, we may have to have another Notre Dame Bama matchup here this year in the playoff.
Yeah, right.
And welcome back to the show, buddy. Appreciate you.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I think that's one of those things where if A happens, then that means it's really good. And and Josh Lugg is one of those guys that if he is that, because remember, he was just as highly ranked as Aaron Banks and Robert Hainsey were coming out of high school. He was an Army All-American and all that stuff.
OC Irish fan says, "What's the maximum number of completions in a 2020 game?" He
okay.
Yeah. What are your projections for 2021? Go Irish. I would think it's going to be more similar to what was maybe the maximum completions in 2018. You mentioned it before when Ian Book first took over. There was a lot more RPOs. His completion percentage was about 70%. I think that could be the more what we're looking at for comparison's sake, 18 to 21, Brian.
Yeah, I'm kind of trying to do the math here quickly on my calculator because this is not one that I'm going to figure out in my head. But if I remember correctly, Ian Book was around 23 to 24 completions per game when he was a starter that year.
In 18?
In 18 as a starter, right?
Yeah.
Prior to 24.3. So I'd say somewhere around 22 to 24 is what I would like to see.
Yeah.
As the average. They averaged 19 this past season.
Okay.
So Ian Book in his starts that year in the regular season was 25, 24, 25, 26, 27, 22, 23, and 22 completions. That's real good consistency.
Yes, it is.
And they had a very high yards per attempt. It was 9.6, 8.4, 7.7, 8.3, 10, 10.1, 7.9, 9.0. He was almost 9 yards per attempt, which would be that's an excellent number. And so then you look at 2020 and it was 19, 12, 16, 11, 16, 18. And then later in the year, we started to see a little bit more, 22, 20, 23, 24, 20, and then 27 against Bama, although a lot of those came in the fourth quarter. So, Ian Book finished the year better than he was, but I think they need to be in that 20, I'd say 22 to 24, maybe 23 to 25 range is where I'd like to see it. But the other part of that is the completion number could be hindered a bit by one thing they did not have in 2018 were home run weapons in the pass game. They didn't have guys, to Trey's question earlier, where you throw a little 5-yard, a little 5-yard pass and it turns into a 50-yard gain, right? They were more of a methodical, 8-9 completion, that kind of thing going down the field. So that is something that to me could factor into that a little bit, but then that's going to ump the yards per attempt. And that makes me feel, I can take that trade-off if it means you're hitting more home runs. No question about it.
James Kearney says, any idea why Coach Elston doesn't get mentioned more as the next head coach? It seems to me as if he's being groomed for it with all the assistant titles.
Well, I think all the assistant titles have more to do with getting him a pay raise.
Yes.
And also the fact that Brian Kelly trusts him to handle some of the things that Brian Kelly otherwise would want to do. And so we've mentioned it before. We've talked about Mike Elston possibly being a candidate for that, but I think part of it is when you look at like a guy like Marcus Freeman, for example, there's more of a dynamic ability, a younger guy, a guy that's been a coordinator. I think there's still a stigma about a guy who hasn't been a coordinator before. I think there's just, now he was a co-DC at, I think, Cincinnati and Central Michigan. He was co-DC with Diaco, but he hasn't been a coordinator at like the Notre Dame level. And I think there's still a stigma about that, even though 2 of the 3 great coaches of the last decade, neither of them were coordinators, Urban Meyer and Dabo Swinney. So yeah, I think that's a big part of why.
Bernie Coder, I think is how that's pronounced. I apologize if it's not. Surprisingly, you guys have forgotten what a beast Kyron Williams was last year. He is the best player on offense with Tyler Buckner closing in, both Heisman candidates. Well, first of all, we didn't forget about him. He's just talked about
a
breakout player.
He was a second-team All-American last year.
Right.
I mean,
So
your breakout is he's going to go up to number 1 first team. I mean, that's not really a breakout to me.
Yeah, the show isn't who's the best player on offense.
Right, and we talk a lot about Kyron Williams.
Yeah,
a lot.
We love Kyron Williams. Let me tell you. There's no love lost.
We're not going to talk about him in every show. That's why we try to change the topics of what we talk about. So, hey, what Kyron Williams topics do you want to discuss today? I would also say that I feel like you're leaving someone out of that best player on offense conversation.
Michael Mayer.
With all due respect to Tyler Buckner and Kyron Williams, I have a feeling that from people I've talked to, their most teams, whether it's All-American rankings or not, but the guy that teams are going to be the most freaking out by the middle of the season this year is going to be Michael Mayer. That's what people tell me. I'm not telling you that. I'm telling you that's what people on the other side of this thing say to me.
Gene Allen, do you feel like either freshman tight end will see any significant playing time this year? Thank you for all your hard work and dedication to us Irish fans.
Possible. I mean, it's possible. They're going to one of them's going to have to crack that number 3 tight end role, though.
Right.
Like if Kevin Bauman and George Takis are both ahead of them, then they won't play a ton. They won't get significant playing time. They'll more have the sort of the George Takis role the last couple of years. Maybe play 80 to 90 snaps. But if one of them can crack the number 2 or number 3 role in the depth chart, which I think they'll get. I think Kane Barong especially is going to get a shot to do. Then I think it'll get significant playing time.
Mm-hmm.
Here's one from Glenn. What do you guys think the running back split carry will be this season? Do you think Kyron will get 3 times the touches Tyree gets like last season, or will it be more split with Tyree? I think it'll be more split, but I don't think, Vince, it's going to be like any kind of 50-50. Yeah. I mean, if Kyron's getting 15 carries, right? So this is run to be carry split, so specific to the question. If you're looking at carries, I mean, I could see a situation where Kyron's at like on average, 15 a game, and Chris is at 7 or 8 a game.
Yep.
So like a 2-to-1 split.
Yep.
Yeah. I think that would be more realistic. And last year Kyron was at 17 a game. That number got dragged down a little bit by the South Florida blowout where he only had 10, and then he got hurt against BC, only had 9. He'd have been up closer to like 18, 19 without that. So I think 15 to 16, again, this is assuming he's also going to hit more big plays. I think that would be a little bit closer. And I also think we're going to see his carries go down a little bit per game, but I think his overall touches are going to go up because I think he's going to have an even greater impact in the pass game.
Matt says Brian's stat game and player recall is Lou-esque, unbelievable memory. I knew what you're
in the same universe as Lou Emoji. Like Lou is the GOAT when it comes to that. And I'll say this, Matt, I don't know if I could get a bigger compliment for my profession, for what I do. That is the ultimate compliment. And I appreciate that very much. I am going to tap into Lou's humility here and say, no. But I appreciate that you think that very much.
That's great. Go ahead and grab that that super.
And we're getting close to Patrick Barnes. Thank you again very much, Patrick, for the super chat. Means a lot. You want to go ahead and read that, Vince? Because I love this one.
Another great Notre Dame breakdown podcast to listen to. I don't even listen to the other Notre Dame podcasts anymore. Do you think this team's success hinges on how well the O-line does this year? I think it's a huge part of it.
Ultimate
not
success,
the only part, but ultimate. Yeah, you're right. Ultimate
we saw in
success,
2018 that Notre Dame can go to the playoff with an average offensive line. We did, right? Yep. We saw and this is why I don't see the drop off that people are talking about. Like 2018, they had a bunch of new starters on the offensive line. You lost Alex Bars in Game 5, who was by far your best lineman, and you still went undefeated and went to the playoff. I mean, 2019, the offensive line took a step back in 2019 from what it was the year before, and they went 11-2. So I don't think that it's going to cost them a lot of games. But to Patrick's question, if this team is going to just do what they did in 2019 and be a decent 10-2 team where you beat up on a bunch of mediocre teams but lose to the 2 good teams you play, which is possible, 2 of the good teams you play, that's possible, then the offensive line is going to be a big part of that. For this team to kind of continue what it's been doing, which is getting to the playoff and then taking the next step, which is a playoff victory, Yeah, the offensive line is going to be a big part of that, because the reason we're saying that, and Vince, I know you agree with me on this, is if the offensive line can play to the level it did last season, but the offensive weapons take a big jump, which we expect, that is the dangerous combination that we're looking forward to. Whereas like 2019, you had great offensive weapons. Tony Jones had a big year. His yards per touch average was much better than Kyren Williams was. He was over a half a yard better per carry in 2019 than Kyren Williams was in 2020. Right. And there's reasons for that. But a big reason for that was you had to deal with so much with Cole Kmet and Chase Claypool, and you had Braden Lindsey was making plays and all that. If you could take like that kind of offensive skill production and then put that with like the 2020 offensive line and then more dynamic individual players than what we saw in 2019 with with Kyren Williams, who you and I would agree is a better running back than Tony Jones Jr. Sure. I'm just talking about what the stats look like. And you put that talent in there, that's where we start getting excited. No question about it. No question about it.
Jacob Watson just got in from hiking. If Notre Dame lands Pope and Nwamka, do you think Notre Dame then uses Pope at wide receiver with all the depth they have in the secondary? They have depth at corner. They don't have depth at safety yet. And we talked yesterday about in the commitment show, Devin Moore, that, look, they could move some corners to safety and things of that nature. But if they get both of those safeties, they're not moving any corners to safety. Mm-hmm. So the depth is a corner situation, not a safety situation. I don't know if I'm stepping out of bounds here, Brian, but that's how I read it.
No, I agree. I mean, I think that they're helping to restore the depth at safety with their depth at corner. Right. But I don't think that they're going to move him to wide receiver. Now, could that happen if some injuries happen? Sure, it could happen, but that's not the intention. They're not going to, if they get Pope soon and then all of a sudden go get Nwamka down the road. And right now I'm not feeling very optimistic about that, by the way. My optimism is gone down a little bit on that. But if they do land both, I don't think that automatically ensures that you move him. I do think what allows you to do is if a need arises at receiver, you'd then be in better position to do that. But I don't think that would be the initial intention.
Leland jumping back in. He says that's the Midnight Sun baseball game, which usually starts at 10 p.m., goes till 1 a.m. A game went into extras one year and lasted until 3 a.m. That is awesome. What an experience that would be. I would love I'd love to see that.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead. Throw up whatever you see. I knew that was going to be it.
Brandon, I'm not going to read that out loud because I don't want to get the Twitter ding, but that is hilarious.
Oh, that's good stuff. Just rule number 7.
Now that we put that out there, you're even going to get in more trouble, which is part of the reason I wanted to throw that out there.
That's great.
Oh, man, my goodness. Let's see here. Ladarius has a question, Vince. If y'all had a early Heisman winner, who would top y'all list?
I haven't really thought about the landscape of college football this season as of yet. I've been so focused on Notre Dame.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have a couple in your head?
I think this is going to be one of the more interesting years in the Heisman Trophy search because I don't think there's not a Trevor Lawrence kind of guy out there. There's not like that name kind of guy out there. I think some of the quarterbacks that are getting hyped up for it are a little overrated. Sam Howell, Keaton Slovis, they're going to put up numbers, but they're not great players. I think it's going to be someone that we're not talking about right now. Who was talking about Mac Jones winning the Heisman last year? He finished second. I think it could be something like that. I think this could be a really good year for a running back to win it. I really do. I think it could be a year where, a Breece Hall, if he has a monster year and Iowa State's able to upset Oklahoma and win the Big 12, he could be that guy. Christopher in our chat just made a good comment of someone who is kind of on my radar. I need to see him grow a little bit, but Spencer Rattler from Oklahoma is one that I look at and say that could be interesting. I've had 2 people jump in already and say Phil Dracovic. That would be very fascinating now, wouldn't it?
I would personally.
But I honestly
think about getting the popcorn.
Yeah, I think it's going to be we're going to have some running back emerge and have a big year, or it's going to be a quarterback that we're not talking a lot about right now. I don't think it's going to – and it hardly ever is like the guys we talk about, right? Like, Trevor Lawrence is a lock to win the Heisman Trophy. Well, even if Trevor didn't get hurt, he probably still doesn't win the Heisman Trophy. And for people talking about Jack Cohn throwing for 4,000 yards, Trevor Lawrence never went over 3,700. That's a lot of yards, So those would be. That's probably, Darius, we're going to do some sort of preseason big picture college football things we closer to the season. I'll think through it a little bit more then and have a better answer for you. But I think, again, generally speaking, a running back or a quarterback that we're not talking a lot about right now, meaning some guy that kind of is a first-year starter. Because what happens with first-year starting quarterbacks, why we see a lot of them win titles or guys that kind of come out of nowhere, is we don't pick them apart as much as we do Trevor Lawrence in his third year.
Right.
Or, you know what I mean? Like that kind of thing, And so Justin Fields gets every part of his game nitpicked last year. Deshaun Watson in 2016 got every single part of his game nitpicked that year. Whereas Mac Jones, first-year starter, and it's like we're just enjoying the ride. We don't nitpick as much as maybe we would have if Tua would have come back another year. You know what I mean? So I think that's part of the conversation as well.
Jacob Watson, I saw your comment earlier, Jacob, and I apologize I didn't get to it. This is such a loaded question. I feel like we could do an entire show on this, Brian. We may have in the past. But he says, what do you think the offense needs to look like to compete for a national championship, from personnel to play style? I think we all assume the defense will get it done on their side.
Yeah, we should do a whole show about this one.
Yeah.
But, and we got a couple things we're working on, and once we get those going, we'll be able to do more interactive of show you some things of what we need to do. But here's really what it boils down to, Jacob, and because Vince has got to roll here soon, so we'll wrap this up here pretty quickly. It's got to be an explosive offense. It's got to be an offense that understands the importance of spreading the field. And when I say spread the field, that does not mean you don't run. Oklahoma spreads the field so they can run. Ohio State spreads the field so they can run. And I think that's where Notre Dame needs to be. Different schemes and whatever. They're not pin and pull teams like Oklahoma and Ohio State are. But, I think spreading the field, being able to run RPOs, being able to get in space, get the ball out to playmakers. They have to have more perimeter playmakers is my big thing. Now, you also have to be able to play physical football because that's who Notre Dame always has to be. But you have to be more explosive. And the one thing that I would think Notre Dame has to do that we haven't seen enough of, Vince, is I do think they have to have the ability and the willingness to I'm trying to think how to say this, go more tempo. I mean, I don't get into the whole, but just you have to be willing to push the tempo a little bit more. You don't have to be like Oregon, but you have to be willing and able to do that real quick. And Corey D, we see your super chat, but I did not read that today. I don't read stuff that other people put out. So,
but we appreciate the super chat.
Yeah.
I'll throw that out there.
But the premise was essentially, you can put it up, Vince. I mean, okay. I don't mind him putting it up. I mean, Tom's my guy, so I don't mind giving Tom some love.
Tom Loy had an
go ahead.
Okay, all right. Tom Loy had an interesting take today, theorizing that one of the reasons Freeman picked Notre Dame over LSU was the promise that he would replace Kelly. What are your thoughts?
I don't have any thoughts on that because, again, I didn't read Tom's story, but I would hope that conversation took place. But if you really want to go somewhere to be a head coach, I would want to go to the dumpster fire that is LSU, because that Orgeron is not going to be around much longer. And I think LSU is going to be hiring a head coach before Brian Kelly does. And yes, I know that he won a title last year, but there's so much crap going on at LSU right now that I don't care if he won a title or not. I think the title was essentially just kind of a stay on his execution as a coach. I really do. I think he's going to be gone before Brian Kelly is. And so, yeah, I would be, if I was just wanted to be head coach, that's a place that if you have an elite head coach, if you have they won a title with a mediocre head coach. They've won 2 titles with mediocre head coaches, Les Miles being the other. Imagine what you could do with a great head coach. Because if Nick Saban would have stayed at LSU instead of going to the NFL, I think he would have done similar at LSU what he did at Alabama.
Absolutely.
I don't know if he would have won quite as much as they did, but he'd have won 3 or 4 titles.
He'd been pretty close, though, because that's still a hotbed for recruiting.
That's a sleeping giant, in my opinion.
Yeah, no question.
It's a weird place, but it is a sleeping giant. No question about it. Got last couple events. Here we go.
Go ahead.
I like this one. Bernie, scale 1 to 10, how jacked are you about the start of the Indy season? I'm about 100. I'm with you. Yes. We didn't agree on the last one because we've been talking about Kyron Williams all off season, but this one, buddy, we are absolutely on the same
I can't
page.
wait to be back in a full stadium, back in the press box, back, walking through campus on a game day, like all of it. I missed so much from last year. I don't like watching games from home, so I'm really excited to get back out there. I'm off the charts excited about it.
Brandon says, my girl doesn't pay attention to this. She just gets so mad I pay all my attention to IB. I'm good. I mean, I appreciate the love, man, but I don't want there to be trouble at home because you're on the show. But I appreciate it very, very much. Maddie K says, "What about Derek King? What about or Derek King? What about him? Or is he one of those overrated?" I don't think either. That's the quarterback of Miami. I love Derek King as a quarterback, but I think part of being a Heisman winner is you have to play on a really good team. It's just become that thing. You have to play on a top team as well as being a great player. And I think Miami's going to be good. But even if he puts up monster numbers, I think Lamar Jackson's the only guy that I can think of in recent years, Vince, that played on an okay team. But Lamar was otherworldly in his production as a passer and a runner. And I don't see Derek being Lamar Jackson. So get the last couple. D-Rock, of course, hit the like button, subscribe, notification bell. Appreciate that very, very much. Last couple we'll get to here, Vince. SGC says, didn't Lombardi say defense wins championships? And yes, when he said that back in the 1950s or 60s, he was right. That was accurate. This is the 2020s now, and that just, there's zero evidence that defense wins championships right now. The last 5-6 years, it's just you got to score, and the evidence is there. Offense. See, Paul Gonzalez, do you guys think that a freshman running back could get any playing time this year? Yes, I expect at least one of them to do that. Absolutely. Ladarius, our resident Alabama fan, what y'all think the preseason top 5 will look like before the season? It's going to be Alabama in some order: Alabama, Clemson, Ohio State, Oklahoma, and Georgia. That's who the 5 will be. The order will be different, but that'll be the 5. I don't know if I necessarily would agree with that, but I also think that someone could jump, but I don't know if I could point to that team. I think that will be the top 5. My number one team going into this year would actually, I'm a big believer that, to be the champ, you got to beat the champ. So I kind of like the notion of putting the champ as the number 1, even though they did lose a lot. But Oklahoma's a dark horse for me this year, Vince, because they finally have a defense that I think is going to be good enough to make stop. They're going to be a great defense, but enough to make some stops. Jacob Watson, thank you guys. By far the thing I look forward to watching daily. I appreciate that very, very
absolutely
much. Very much. And I think that is it. So everybody, Vince, we appreciate everybody being part of the show today. This was a lot of fun. It was a great way to kick off our week. Tomorrow we're going to talk about the breakouts on defense.
Right.
Vince, we said Wednesday is when we're going to do our Florida State preview, right?
Yep.
So start kicking off the season. Vince is going to be gone on Thursday, so I got to try to find some topics and people to do the show with. And then Friday we got our mailbag.
Mailbagging it.
Yep. So be ready to be with us. And again, appreciate y'all very much. The growth we've had this channel the last few months has been awesome. Spread the word, tell your friends, give us a like, subscribe, notifications bell, check out irishbreakdown.com. If you're listening via podcast, give us a 5-star review. But the biggest thing is tell your Notre Dame friends and family about our show. Have them be part of it. Come join us. It's going to be a lot of fun. We're excited to do it, and we're
Can't wait for
glad to be on the ride with you all. So everybody have a great day. We'll talk to you again very, very soon.